What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the stream. I'm Ian Douglas. I'm the author of the website Tech Interview Guide, which normally I would have on the TV behind me, but I had a whole bunch of work to do today and never got around to changing that. So let me go do that real quick. Voila. Need to find a way to make that remote. I can do that from my main desktop without having to go hit a key on a keyboard back there. We'll figure that out someday. Today is not that day. Hope you're doing great. Happy time zone wherever you are. If it's Thursday, happy Thursday. If it's Friday already, welcome. Hope you're having a great Friday. And if you're watching on YouTube later, like, subscribe. I'm always open to feedback, so please leave comments in the bottom. Any links that we discussed during the stream, I'll make sure are in the YouTube description later on. But hope you're all doing well. Have a ton of Discord questions that I want to get through tonight. But as always, you're welcome to leave questions in chat over here. If you do want to ask something anonymously, I've got an anonymous way to ask questions. You can basically send a whisper over to my chat bot and it'll show up as an anonymous question. So you're welcome to use that at any time. Aside from that, hope you're all doing well. I'm going to be in San Francisco in a couple of weeks, and I'm trying to arrange coffee hangouts and lunch hangouts and stuff like that. I'm going to have most of the day Thursday that I can be downtown doing stuff. I fly in on Sunday. I fly out on Friday morning, early Friday, actually Friday afternoon or something like that. So I'll have a little bit of time maybe for a breakfast on Friday. Throughout the day on Thursday, I'll be available probably downtown-ish. And then, yeah, looking forward to just meeting some folks. So if you're in the Bay Area and you want to hang out, drop me a line, drop me a note, let me know. Happy to hang out and meet with folks. Yeah, let's see what else is going on. Did a whole bunch of talks today. Did a career prep, interview prep kind of talk. It was supposed to be an hour. It went almost 2 hours, which was fantastic. Group from Turing, where I used to be a teacher. They asked really, really, really good questions. So I had a blast chatting with them and hanging out with them for a little bit. Let's see what else is going on. Had a lot of things going on today, actually. A lot of little impromptu meetings and chatting with customers and stuff like that. Finishing up a blog post that I was hoping to get done today, but it'll get done tomorrow morning, and then that'll hopefully get published next week. We'll see. We got our donation goal updated here. We're at almost $200, getting towards the end of the year. I'm narrowing down on a few things that I think we'll print for our October giveaway. Got a number of these things that 3D print kind of flat, and then you take it apart and you put all the parts together and assemble. So I got a few ideas for those. I'm going to be actually selling one of my printers this weekend, and I've got a couple more on the way that probably won't get, well, one of them won't be here until October. One's hopefully going to be here in a couple of weeks. And then I'm going to assemble one from scratch. So they're literally sending me boxes of parts, and I'm going to put the whole printer together myself. So that's going to be a fun, interesting sort of engineering challenge. It's been a while since I've built a 3D printer from scratch like that. It's been a couple of years. But this is all new tech and new ways of building out 3D printers. So I'm excited about it. And then let's see what else. Oh, I have to talk about this. Let me go over to here. Let me pull up this and this. Let me switch over to that screen for a second here. Let's go over to here. So my Babe Russ painting that's on the wall back here next to my lights now has a sibling. I was on Babe Ross's stream a couple of weeks ago, and she was doing an auction, and I won another one of her pieces. So it's hanging on a wall just around the corner from my desk here, and I was excited to have that. So let's see, what else have I got going on? I was working on making a 3D printed spyglass for somebody. Just show you this real quick, just as people kind of drop by. So I was 3D printing a spyglass that somebody found from a movie or something. I don't even know what movie it's from. It kind of took everybody through the progression of this is what it was looking like assembled, and then how I went through and I was painting fake wood grain on the wood to make it look mahogany. So it started off kind of the smooth sort of brown color. It's a wood-based filament, so you can like sand it and kind of rough it up a little bit, but it doesn't look like wood grain. you have to kind of add that texture yourself. So I went in and I kind of figured out like, how do I do different kinds of washes and different sort of tones and things like that to actually make it look like wood grain. And then was aging these rings. I ended up reprinting these rings in the brass color, in this color instead of the orangey gold color that you see back here in the background. I printed it more in this bronze sort of color. And then just going through and like looking at the aging techniques and stuff like that. So that's kind of what it's looking like. I may go a little bit darker on the main body, the spyglass. And then these rings here with the symbols in them, they're going to be more of this bronze color instead of the bright gold. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. And then there's these little dials that go in. So I got to clean these up a little bit. So I was looking at, should I do it in this color or this color? So just trying to figure out all that kind of stuff. And then the person that I'm making this for is going to assemble it and like put the little dials and stuff in here. And there's like little 3D printed arrows to attach in here with like a little pin and stuff like that. So they're going to finish on the assembly. And then, yeah, I got the Babe Ross painting it today. So hope you're all doing great. Let's see, what else is news? The new email newsletters are out, and they are working fantastic. And so if you want to subscribe, you can go over to the website, and it's just daily email series. I'll drop the link over here in chat. You can go subscribe to that if you like. And when you subscribe, you will get an email with a link, and you have to click on that link to like finish subscribing. So just giving me your email address here doesn't do anything. You actually have to go click on a link, follow that link, and then you'll get to a page that looks like this where you'll see your email address show up, and then you'll be able to come in here and select like, I want this newsletter. This is how frequently I want to get it, like how many days in between do you want to get those messages, and then the date that you want to get the next message kind of thing. So this page has just been loaded up for a while. That's why it's not up to date. If I reload the page, we should see those dates kind of repopulate. Yeah. So my general tips, I'm going to get the next one. Actually, the next message I got was today. And so the system is looking at like, when do you want to get the next one? And then how many days apart do you want them? Stuff like that. So yeah, so that's all up and running. Then you have to hit the save button down at the bottom. But these 3 newsletters are ready to go. So the behavioral tips and the technical questions, those are all set, ready to go. The general tips, I'm still working on some of the content here. And so there's only about a dozen messages right now. I'm going to be adding more. You won't get them, though, unless you like resubscribe later. And it's not to force people to come back and resubscribe, just the way that I'm sort of numbering the messages. I don't want to just add it on the end. I want to do them in sort of logical progression of like, here's how to get started, talk about general tips, and then talk about growth, and then talk about phone screens, and then talk about like how to actually do the interviews, and then how to do negotiations and so on, then how to start the job. So I want to kind of follow that logical order of like, how do you prepare? How do you actually apply? And so on and so on. The preparation mailing list is taking longer than anticipated, just because there's so much content I have to go through and edit on that. So the preparation mailing list is going to take a little bit longer, so I'll make sure to make a big announcement on that one. So that's up and running. Otherwise, these are ready to go. Zooey, good to see you. Thought that was the mid-January AI art piece. No, that was actually a painting from Babe Ross here on Twitch. She's streaming right now. She makes really amazing artwork. She's painting from a photo of like a cougar skull or something. She's like hand painting the thing, and just working on all the depth and the realism of it's pretty intense. So yeah, so I got another one of her paintings. So there's one up on the wall here, and then there's that new one that I just showed a picture of a moment ago. Happy to support other artists and stuff like that. Yeah, otherwise, that's all good to go. Nope, that's me. Y'all know what I look like. Oh, I was showing some folks on the stream today. So we shared this link last stream or the stream before. I'll drop it in chat again here. This is a resource that somebody gave me on how do we go find people to talk about jobs that they have. So how do you find hiring managers and recruiters? Because we kind of dish that out as advice of like, oh, just go find somebody to talk to about the job. But how do you actually find someone that's looking for, or that's trying to hire for a particular job? So you can come in here and say, I want to find people from, I don't know, Gusto that are looking for, let's say, Ruby developers. Doesn't matter where, don't care about role, but I know I want to work at Gusto and I want to work on Ruby, so is anybody hiring? So Daniel Lee, software engineer working at Gusto, works with Ruby. We're hiring. They currently do Ruby, so this might be a good person to connect with. Like, hey, you currently work there in a Ruby role. What's it like? Principal engineer doing Ruby and JavaScript and so on at Gusto. So it's a good way of narrowing it down. And basically, all the site is it's kind of like a Google search sort of proxy, where you go in and you tell it what you want Google to go search for, and then it actually opens a new tab of like, here's how to Google, and goes through and says like, only look for linkedin.com or www.linkedin.com, different URLs to ignore and things like that. And it'll actually narrow down and go find you a whole bunch of people that you can go talk to about that company working in that kind of role. So it'll make it a little bit easier maybe to find folks to network with. So definitely recommend that. I don't know who built it, so I don't know anything about what they're doing with the data or anything like that, but I think it's a really, really helpful tool. It looks like you can actually save these things. If you want to come back and like call it back up later on, you can. Otherwise, you can just do like one-off searches and go from there. We got Bets in the chat. Hey, Bets, I was showing off your spyglass here a minute ago. So the spyglass that I was putting together is for Bets. So we'll go back over to here. I've already sent Bets all these pictures, so yeah. So actually the printer just finished reprinting these rings in that brass or that bronze color. So they won't be this orangey gold anymore. They're going to be more this bronze color. So I'll get that checked out a little bit later. So they'll all be that color, and then the little sort of meters, as they're called, we'll get all of those printed in this bronze color. And then there's a gem right here that's going to get printed. So I still have to do those, but hopefully get everything finished printed tomorrow. Get these pieces like sanded down and smoothed down a little bit, and then hopefully get in a box and shipped out to Bets this weekend. So we'll see. And then, yeah, the talk that I did today was just general interview preparation, and some folks were asking lots of questions about this resume sample that we talked about. And I think I made a thing for that. Didn't I? Resume sample. Did I make a command for that? Yeah. So if you do !! resume sample, it'll actually like show you this link, and you're welcome to come in here at any time and just grab any of this content in here, and borrow from this if you like. You don't have to, but it was just an example of like, here's how I like to make a resume. And I was basically talking to the students today about, because you're coming out of a boot camp, I would rather see the education listed before like non-technical experience. In this case, I was listing technical experience from the last session that we all did here on the stream. But I was telling them like this would be like where you would list your non-technical experience. Once you have technical experience, that would actually go above your project work and so on. So I was basically talking them through that, what I like to see as far as projects go, all the stuff that you heard me say here on stream. I was basically walking folks through that. So it was supposed to be a 1 hour sort of like Q&A chat. Ended up being close to 2 hours with all the awesome questions that they asked. So it was really fantastic. And was also talking to them a little bit about the company research stuff that we've done here as well. So if you're curious what all those are, you can go check out the YouTube channel. All those videos are up on YouTube. You can go check those out at any time. There's lots of playlists and things like that you can go see. So over on the YouTube channel, lots of playlists around preparation, like general Q&A, and then preparation, like how do you research, how do you prep, how do you do resumes? A lot of you have watched me do resume reviews and things like that. Job posts, critiquing, and so on, and then a playlist on how do you apply for the job, a whole playlist on technical questions, behavioral questions, all that kind of stuff. So lots and lots of content up on YouTube that you can go check out. And I'm always happy to get feedback from folks on that. So if there's anything else that you'd like me to cover as far as content, you're welcome to drop that in chat anytime or send me a message, and I will absolutely take all that into consideration. Otherwise, tonight's just going to be a giant Q&A kind of stream. I got a huge backlog of stuff in Discord again to get through, and I do want to get some more of those short YouTube videos and podcast audio lined up for September, because I'm going to be out for a little bit in September, maybe for one stream. I'm debating the week of the 20th, whatever week that's going to be. Like the 18th through the 23rd. I'm going to stream that morning on the 18th, but then I'm flying to San Francisco in the evening. I thought I was flying earlier in the day, but I'm not flying out to the evening. And then I'll be in San Francisco until Friday morning. I leave at like noon, so I'll have time to like get up and have breakfast. And then I got to get to the airport, kind of thing, to fly back home. But if anybody's in San Francisco and wants to hang out, let me know. I'm happy to meet folks. I'll be available for like breakfast Thursday, Friday. If you want to hang out during the day Thursday, I can meet for coffee or lunch or things like that. But that Thursday, I'm going to still be in San Francisco because I don't fly home until Friday morning. I'm trying to figure out whether I want to stream from San Francisco on that Thursday. Maybe see if there's like another like Twitch streamer or something like that. Like we can do like a co-hosted stream or something. I don't know. We'll figure that out. Got a couple of weeks to try to plan that sort of thing. But I'll be in the Bay Area, so I may not stream on September 22nd. There's also a Sunday coming up for what we have in the United States is Labor Day weekend, which is September 4th. So it won't be this coming Sunday, but the following Sunday. I don't plan to stream. This Sunday we've got somebody from, where are they coming from? Tech interview guide / streaming. It's Salman Shah. Oh yeah, they're from Microsoft. So last Sunday we had somebody from Stripe. This Sunday we got somebody from Microsoft. So this person at Microsoft actually works on the Azure team. Azure is kind of their cloud platform. So we're going to have someone from the Azure team from Microsoft come and talk to us on Sunday, and that's going to be about like what kinds of roles can you do on Azure, like what kinds of development roles do you hire for, and then how does somebody stand out as a candidate for Microsoft. So I'm really looking forward to that one. I think that'll be great. I've applied to Microsoft jobs in the past, and their process is a little slower than most. When I was doing my job hunt back in December and January, I was applying for jobs in December and January and didn't hear anything back until like April or May. I had already started in my job, and then I started getting the emails from Microsoft going, thanks, but we're going to move on, find someone else. It's like, yeah, I've already been working in this other job, and I'm perfectly content at this job, so thanks anyway. So their process is a little bit slower, but it'll be interesting to have a chat with somebody at Microsoft to find out, like, how does somebody stand out to a big company like Microsoft? What's that going to be like? And then that Thursday, we've got Oliver, who is a startup co-founder, and we're going to talk to them about what's it like to actually apply for a job at a startup. How does startups, in general, how do they kind of balance like work-life balance? With needing to get things done, but also recognizing you need recharge time and things like that. So we'll talk to them about their startup. And then September the 4th, we won't stream because that's a long weekend here. And we usually like to get out of town for long weekends, so I won't be around that Sunday. So just as a heads up there. Twitch is acting weird today. Yeah, don't know. Hopefully it'll settle down for you. Cool. Well, let's dive in on the Q&A. I'll be doing lots of clips, and so you'll see lots of stuff happening over here in chat about like starting to record and stopping recording and all that kind of stuff. If anything big happens, like we get a wild and gigantic raid or something like that, I may stop and pay attention, or I may not, but we'll see. But otherwise, I tend to ignore chat when I'm answering the questions, just so I can kind of focus on what that is. Just so people watching the YouTube later or listening to the podcast audio later, they're not like, oh, I really like missed out on something that happened in chat. So that's partly why I'm choosing to not pay attention to chat when I'm doing those questions. But yeah, we got lots and lots of questions in the Discord channel that I want to get to, like quite a few. So I want to talk about some of those. We'll get those recorded as shorts, YouTube shorts and things like that. We'll get those up on YouTube. And yeah, I think we'll go from there. But as always, if you got questions about like anything career related, anything interview related, even outside of the tech industry, I'm absolutely happy to entertain any questions that you have. Happy to chat about my experiences and things, or to give my perspective. Having been in the tech industry, what do you think about this as like a sales role or something like that? Happy to take any kinds of questions like that if I can help out. Happy to lend my ideas. Otherwise, we're gonna hop in and do some Q&A. All right, the first question that we're going to get into today was a student at the Turing School of Software Design, which used to be based in Denver, Colorado. Now they are a remote school. This particular student is someone that I've been helping as a mentor, And so I've kind of reworded their question a little bit and taken away some of the context of it. But the question was basically saying, I'm a student at Turing. I was asked to make yet another take-home assignment for another new company where I'm interviewing. I'm getting tired of building so many things that never go anywhere beyond the interview. What can I do? The advice that I gave this person that I was mentoring was, you don't have to go build a take-home assignment every single time you're assigned one. That is kind of the expectation. As a hiring manager, if I give you some sort of take-home work, I hope you're actually going to do the take-home assignment that I'm giving you. But you can certainly contact the company and ask a direct question to them and say, hey, I'm actively interviewing with a number of other companies. Here's some take-home assignments that I've recently done for other companies. Is there something additional above and beyond that you would like me specifically to go build new without having to go build an entire new project? In the case of this particular student, they were a back-end student at Turing, and the back-end program at Turing teaches Ruby on Rails. This particular student was given a take-home assignment of, you're applying for a full stack position, so we want to see if you can do a Rails application plus React as a front end. This particular student's like, oh, do I have to go build out like the whole Rails backend all over again? And my answer to them was no, just go find one of your existing Rails APIs and just add React on top of it. You already know what the backend does, so you don't have to go rebuild that. But you need to talk to the company first, because if they have a very specific sort of database schema that they want you to use, you may need to conform to that. Or what I recommended to them was contact the company and say, I have this current Rails API project that I've built. I'm going to go add React to it if that's okay, but I'm going to do it as a separate repo and not make like one big monolith repo with all of this stuff in it, or what we call a mono repo. And I'm going to have them as two separate things. So I'll have a front end and a back end, and I'll show you what I'm capable of doing. The other piece of advice that I gave them was, do you have to go be an expert in React in order to go build that? Or like, how much React do you have to learn to go adequately show the kind of skill that you have in React? Now, in this student's case, again, they're a back-end student. They hadn't studied front end at all. They knew a tiny bit of JavaScript, but they had never built a React app before. So what I also recommended to them was, in that conversation that they have with the company over, here's some work that I've already done. Is it okay if I just add React to it? Would that be enough? Wait to get a yes or no from them. But in that same message, you could also say, I don't know React. I've never built anything with React before. I'm happy to show you what I'm capable of learning, but it's going to take a little bit of time, or I can just show you how much I can get done within a time window. So if you want it in 24 hours, I'll show you how much I can build in 24 hours. If you want to give me like 3 or 4 days, I'll show you how much I can learn and how much I can go implement within 3 or 4 days. But the key point there is, let them know that you're going to build on top of an existing project, that you're not going to go build this whole thing from scratch. But you want to make sure that they're okay with that. If they come back and say, well, we really had like a particular database schema in mind because we want to see how you would build out the database and things like that, you can have that conversation with them then. But I think if you frame the question from the mindset of, I'm already interviewing with a number of other companies, so I don't want to have to, like, you don't want to say this in the email, but you basically need to get the point across to them, like, I don't want to have to go build another entire project. How can I avoid that? So what you want to do is tell the company, hey, I'm actively interviewing. I'm really intrigued and I want to get into the interview process with your company. But for the sake of time, would you be willing to evaluate these other projects that I've built very recently for other interviews? Here are the links to my GitHub repos. Let me know if this is sufficient, or if you really do want me to build something new. But I would like to submit this as my effort around, like, this is what I've done recently. Companies are probably more open than you think around that sort of thing. They really just want to see, like, what can you do in a hurry, or what can you do under pressure? And if they know that you're already interviewing, but that you actually really care about them and that you're thinking about their priority from a standpoint of time investment, and you're also in that process, you're thinking about their time as well. Like, you don't have to sit and wait a week for me to go build this. Here's a bunch of stuff I've already done. If you're willing to evaluate that, then we can just move forward. We can get right into the interviews. So that would be my advice from that aspect, is you don't necessarily have to go build an entire new project. You can either build onto something you've already done, but you want to get their permission first. You want to make sure it's okay with them that you do that. You don't want to just bolt on, what you think you need and make assumptions. They may have something specific in mind. Or you can say, here's a bunch of existing projects that I've got. Is there something specific that I can add to one of these existing code bases that, you want to see me highlight as a skill? So that I don't have to build this whole thing from scratch. Is there something that I can just add to an existing project? The worst they'll say is no. The worst they'll do is they'll come back and say, no, we really want you to build this whole thing. And at that point, you need to evaluate, is that job worth that time investment? Like, if you are actively interviewing with other companies, is it worth spending another day, 2 days, 3 days, building out another take-home assignment? But that's up to you to decide at that point once they say no. But that would be a great way from a hiring manager's perspective to also speed up the process. And that might actually open my eyes a little bit as the hiring manager to say, hey, you know what? Maybe we don't have to ask everybody to build something from scratch. We can say, hey, if you've already got a project in this kind of code base, can you just go add authentication to it? Or can you just go add an authorization component? Like once you get to this page, you have access to do one thing or not. Maybe there's like a specific skill that they want to see you demonstrate. As opposed to, I know how to do Rails new and like go build a whole new project. That may not be what they're looking for. So all you need to do is ask. Hey, B Gross Design, you're not late at all. You're welcome to join any old time. Zooey, to answer your question, did they actually get any feedback? I haven't heard yet. I'm hoping that they get told that, yeah, you can just submit, what you've already got. It worked for me. But again, you have to be respectful with them about that. So when I did this back in December and January, I'm trying to think of when I wrote that code. It was already into January when I wrote that code for Datadog. They wanted me to build an API, put it in a Docker container, and deploy to the cloud. And I did, but I did it very quickly. And I wrote them a note saying, like, I did this specifically in a hurry because I wanted to show you what I was capable of in only 24 hours. And they wrote back and they're like, oh, we've never actually had a candidate say, this is what I'm capable of in a short amount of time to show a level of, let me go learn a thing and so on. And they actually appreciated it. And, eventually I got an offer from Datadog. But then I had 2 other companies say, hey, we want you to go build a thing. And I'm like, I just did this thing. Will you consider that? And they're like, yeah, that's fine. So you just have to be respectful about it. And it's all about the wording and the messaging about, you don't want to be like, oh, do I have to go build something new? Like, you don't want to make it sound like you're whining about it. But you can say, hey, I'm actively interviewing. Will you evaluate this code that I literally just wrote like a week ago or days ago? They just want to know, like, have you got something recent that we can look at? So it depends. I mean, company to company. Like I said in that answer, though, they might have something specific that they want you to sort of demonstrate. So you can always ask, if there's a particular thing you want me to demo, I'll go add that to an existing project. Cool. Let me go mark that in Discord that one has been answered, and then we will find more questions. So we got a lot of stuff in Discord. So today's just going to be a giant Q&A. So if you've got questions, feel free to drop them over here in chat. And again, if you want to ever ask anything anonymously, you can send a whisper over to my chat bot. So literally just click on the name of ID736bot and you'll see a whisper. You can just send a whisper message. It will need to be not like maximum length because the whisper bot or the chat bot has to say like, hey, we got an anonymous question. So it is going to take up some of the 500 characters of space. So don't send an enormous question. Try to make it concise, like a couple of sentences, and send that in. And if I need more context, you can just keep whispering to the bot and they'll show up as like additional follow-up. Cool. Let's dive in on another great question here from Discord. Had another great question come in from Discord, and I've got a whole Discord community. I'll drop those links in the description below. And when people talk to me on all these different platforms, I basically summarize their question, strip out some of the context, and present the question here. So this question was basically saying, hey, job searching, it typically entails several rounds of interviews, followed by lots of waiting periods, and it can be a really long process to actually go through between applying and going through the interviews and then waiting for the offer. Do I think that job seekers should get paid for interviews? I think the answer to this is a little bit nuanced. Should you get paid for the time that it takes to actually interview? I would say if you're working, like if they really want you to build like a take-home assignment and that's going to take many hours, I think you should get paid for that time. I think that would be a fantastic way to treat a candidate, that even if they don't get hired, if you've screened them well enough to the point where you want them to do a take-home assignment, then I think it's a great move and builds a lot of goodwill from the company to say, hey, we recognize this is going to take some time. We'll pay you, you know, a couple $100 to go build that project, and then we'll evaluate it from there. Now, if you make really garbage code, then you're not going to get forward in the interview process anyway. But I think just to get paid for the overall process of, you know, every time I interview with you, I'm on the clock and I'm going to like, you know, do the equivalent of like bill you for my time kind of thing. Like every interview, I hope to get like $50. Most companies aren't going to do that. It already costs them an enormous amount of money to screen people and actually do the interviews and things like that. So like just watching you work your way through a technical challenge, no, I don't think companies should pay you for that. But I think where they could pay people would be on the idea of doing these big extended take-home assignments. So similar to another question I've answered recently about, you know, do I have to go build another whole big project? If there's something very specific that that company wants you to build to demonstrate your skill, you could ask and say, hey, this is going to take X amount of hours. Is it possible to get some sort of reimbursement for my time in order to do that? Some companies will be open to the conversation. Some of them won't. Some of them will say, no, we don't pay our candidates. But there are companies out there who will pay candidates to do their interviews. Now, I wouldn't try to make that like a source of income by any means. Like, don't go seek out those companies just to like work through their interview process on the side to try to generate like a side hustle, because there aren't that many companies to begin with. But there are companies out there who will pay you for your time if you're doing the take-home assignment, because they know it's going to take a while. There's one company in Boulder, Colorado, near where I live, that I don't know if they still do this, but several years ago, they got kind of a bad rap in our kind of localized tech community by giving you a take-home assignment and say, we're going to give you a month to build out this assignment. So you don't necessarily have to build it all in one shot. You'll have plenty of time. You'll have many weeks to go through and actually build this assignment. The downside is they said our expectation is that you're going to spend upwards of 40 hours building this project. It's like, I'm not going to spend 40 hours. Like, unless your company's like really, really amazing and you're paying top dollar salary, I'm not spending 40 hours building a project from scratch. And it was unpaid. It's like, if you'll pay me for those 40 hours, that's a little bit different, because then we can work out like what my salary is going to be and I can figure out what that 40 hours is actually worth. But that 40-hour time commitment, even spread out over a month, is a couple of hours a day. And nobody's going to spend that kind of time for free. So I think if a company has an expectation that you're going to build something of size and of value to their overall interview process, yes, I think companies should offer some kind of reimbursement. Not that you get guaranteed an interview, because that's not reimbursement, but say, you know, we expect this project to take more than 8 hours, so we're going to pay you like a day of wage or something like that. Like, it doesn't have to be like tons and tons of money, but don't say like, oh, we'll send you a t-shirt if you do it. Like, that doesn't mean much to people. Offering them like actual tangible, like, we're going to send you like a code or something to redeem for a gift card of your choice for $100 or $150, $200. Like, it doesn't have to be a huge amount of money. Because if you've gone through enough screening process to think, you know, hey, I think Ian could actually like do this job. Let's give Ian that take-home assignment, and then we'll evaluate that code when it comes in and we'll wrap up the interviews. So I think if you do it at the end of your interview process, you've already screened out the people that you don't think could do the job. And you've probably already screened out the people that aren't as interested in working at your company at that point. When I worked at SendGrid, we used to do that take-home assignment as one of the initial intakes and say, let's get you on the phone, we'll do a phone screen, and if that worked out, we gave you a take-home. And then we built the rest of the interview around that take-home assignment. The problem with that is if we were to pay everybody that did the take-home assignment, we would end up paying way more people than the people that actually made it to the final rounds. And so as an interviewer, as a hiring manager, I would have to really think about, like, where do I put in that paid assignment where we're actually going to pay out cash to get some kind of return on that investment. Like we want to make sure that we're weeding out the people that aren't early enough in the process that we don't expect that they're going to finish the assignment or they're not going to do well on the assignment. I would want to see a little bit of code demonstrated and a little bit of skill demonstrated before I give you that take-home assignment. And then say, do like a git commit kind of history. Like we want to see the git commit messages of when you worked on things and how you sort of built out the code. That would be far better for me as a hiring manager, but that would have to be later in the process. And then at that point, because it's later in the process, pay the candidate for it. Most companies, though, are not going to pay for your time. You can ask. Again, the worst they'll say is no. I don't, unless you're being really rude or really arrogant about it, this isn't worth my time and I'm not going to do this unless you pay me X dollars, to be like, fine, then don't do it. And they'll just withdraw you as a candidate at that point. So you don't want to do it from a place of disrespect. But if you ask respectfully and say, hey, I'm actively interviewing with a number of other companies, building this whole thing from scratch, I'm expecting to take 10 to 20 hours. If that's your expectation of time commitment from me to go build this, can we talk about reimbursement for my time to actually go build this? Because it's taking away from other things that I could be doing. It's going to take me away from interviewing. It's going to take me away from maybe your regular job. You can ask respectfully. Again, the worst they'll say is no. But it really depends on at what stage in that process they're giving you that take home. If they're doing it as a screening technique, they'll probably say no. So if it's really early in the process, they'll probably say no. If it's later in the process, they might be more likely to say yes. And you could also word that message like, I've demonstrated up until now that I can do the job. I'm happy to work on this take-home assignment, but because it's going to take time away from other things, are you open to the idea of compensation of X dollars in order for me to do this, or do you have some sort of compensation in mind? Again, the worst they'll say is no, but you might get surprised. They might be open to that conversation if it's later on in that process. All right, let me catch up on chat here. So Bigro says, I'm taking a college Java class, also trying out she codes for a quicker certificate. Cool. Hoping a certificate will help beef up my LinkedIn page and pop on my resume. The certificate alone probably won't. It's really the projects that are going to come out of that. So if you've got specific projects where you're building out kind of those fundamentals around things like go build a login page so I know that you know how to do authentication, or show me like how to build a what we call a CRUD application where you can create, read, update, and delete data from a database or a data storage of some kind. At that sort of fundamental level, if you can demonstrate a project showing those fundamentals, that always looks good on a resume. So part of the talk that I gave earlier today was what kinds of projects should you put on a resume? And what I was suggesting is having something that's highly relevant to my company should be the first project on there. The second project you should put on there is something showing me these fundamentals. Like I know how to handle form input data. I know when and why to use CFRF tokens. I know about, basic web security. You don't have to go do all those things, but showing the fundamentals of, I know how to build a CRUD app. I know how to save and retrieve stuff. And then the third project is something that you're really interested in. And ideally that thing that you're really, really interested in is also something that my company is really interested in. If not, it's okay too. That'll kind of give you a well-rounded sort of portfolio for that resume for that company. Now, are all of those projects going to be the same for every company? Not necessarily. Now, if you are working around a particular industry, then maybe those projects will be relevant to all of the companies in that industry. And so in that case, you could just send the same resume. Same skills are needed, same kinds of projects are going to be relevant from that perspective. So the first project should be something that my company is going to be really keen to see. The second one is show me some other kind of fundamental sort of web development skill or some other programming skill that you want me to know about. And the third one could be a passion project or something that you're really interested in or something that you're just really, really proud of. Those would be the three projects I would leave on a resume. Now, the order of those things may differ from company to company. This is also why I talk about building a really big resume and, eventually when you're applying for a job, you're going to trim out the other projects that aren't as relevant to my company to bring that back down ideally to one page. But if you need 2 pages, that's okay too. But again, I want to know in a hurry, do you have the skill that I'm looking for? Are you relevant for this role? That's what's going to get me interested in getting you on the phone. So those would be the 3 projects that you do. So from Bigros, from your specific question of like, I'm hoping a certificate's going to give me a boost, it'll help because it'll show that you've actually gone and you've learned some sort of structured curriculum. So I'm not implying that certifications won't help at all. I'm saying by itself, it won't help. It really is like, what else is the outcome of getting that certificate? Like, what did you actually go learn? How can you demonstrate those skills? That will stand out more on a resume in conjunction with showing that certificate. So having the certificate as education, it's good. Having projects that came out of that is better. Icon 33, I rock. Thank you. Appreciate that. You also rock. Thank you for dropping by. Give you some blinky lights and a hello. Thanks for dropping by, Icon 33. Feel free to drop a follow as well. I'll focus on 3 projects to start. Prove my learned skills that link to each position. Okay. Yeah. So again, like as a hiring manager, when I'm looking at that list of projects on your resume, I really hope that the first project that you list is highly relevant to me. Now, a project that's relevant to me might not be relevant to, let's say, Zooey in chat. Let's say Zooey is also a hiring manager and you're applying to both of our companies. The project that's more relevant to Zooey should be at the top of the resume that you give to Zooey, and the project that's more important to me should be at the top of that project portion of your resume for the resume that you send to me. So you're constantly going to be moving these things around as you're applying for these jobs. But making that one big resume where you're listing all of your projects, at least they're all on there, they're all formatted the same way, you got all the links in there that we would want to see. And then you can just go figure out, okay, when I apply for this job, I'm going to make a copy of that resume. I'm going to rearrange those things for what's important to that company. And now that I've rearranged that stuff, I've got a customized resume just for them. That's what's going to like really stand out and make me really interested in interviewing you. So having something that's highly relevant to me, something that shows fundamentals around like, these are the things that I know how to go build, whether it's an API or a desktop app or a web app, like whatever's important to them to show fundamental learning. And then some kind of project that's interesting to you or something that you're super proud of that you want to highlight to them. Those would be the 3 projects I would keep on whatever resume that you're sending to that particular company. All right, we got a bunch of other stuff happening in chat. How many projects should I aim to have in a starting portfolio? Yes, I would absolutely get those on GitHub. I would say the more projects you can build, the better, but don't feel overwhelmed like, oh, if I don't have 10 projects, I'm not a good developer. Again, if you can show like even just one big project that shows those fundamentals around like authentication, authorization, database storage, form processing, session management, like a lot of these certificates and a lot of these bootcamp programs, they're going to teach you these things. Maybe not all of them, but if you can build a project with those fundamentals, you can also use that as like, okay, well, now that I've got this thing where people can log in and save stuff in a database, now I can just go add a to-do list thing in that app. So you're still logging in, but now you see a link to like, go manage your to-do list. And now I'm going to do like a recipe, kitchen inventory kind of thing. So let's go design out the database for that. And I'm going to build that into the application as well. And so maybe the application is going to feel like Frankenstein's monster of like, you're just bolting on all these things. That's okay too. You're still showing me, hey, this is how I've built out these fundamentals. This is what I know to do. And I've actually gone and added all these little micro apps in here that the users can do once they're logged in. So you could build it out in that sense. Or you could just make them as separate apps. And so one thing that I recommended to this group that I spoke with today is if you go build that app with the authentication and session management, blah, 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 you can use that as kind of a skeleton sort of code, like make a copy of that repo to then go build whatever else you want. But all of the kind of inherent like database setup and authentication and session management is already there. So you don't have to go rebuild that in a whole new app every time. Just make a copy of that core application and use that as what we call a scaffolding to then go build whatever other application you want to build. So you don't have to necessarily make one enormous project, but you also don't have to go make 20 different projects to highlight each of those other things. You can make fewer projects, but really as a hiring manager, it's about how do I see the relevance of what it is that you're building as your projects? How, like which of those are relevant to what I do as a company? That's what's going to make your resume stand out to get those interviews. So it's not just the certification. It's also figuring out like, what is important to the companies where I want to apply. Like, what kinds of companies do you want to apply to, so that you can figure out from there, how do I know what kind of project to even go build? Like, if you really want to work in the email industry, you'll go build several projects about, okay, or maybe just one project where you say, I've got a thing where the user can go in and specify like which email system they want to send through. They want to send it through SendGrid or MailChimp or AWS or whatever. Like, all these places have email sending APIs. I'm just going to go build one thing where you can construct a message and it'll send it out through whichever email system you want. You click a button saying, send through SendGrid, send through MailChimp, and it'll like go send through that other thing. Now you've got one application that you can then go take to all of those companies and say, I really like working with this kind of thing. Here's what I've built that's relevant to your company. This is why I want to come work for you. Here's a project to go evaluate where I'm kind of like doing this side-by-side comparison of different email APIs and how I've implemented each of them. So I've got a good understanding of all the major players in the industry. And now you can go apply at all those companies with one project, as opposed to having to go build out separate projects for everybody. Hey, V Whiskey, good to see you in chat as well. D-Bird Fleishy. Not sure how you want me to pronounce that. I'm just going to call you D-Bird, if that's okay. I'm trying to sign up for your daily email, but it's giving me an error. There was an error processing your request. Rutro. All right, let's go see what's going on. So let me pop over here and let's go try the sign up. Thanks for letting me know. So let me go find a new address here. We'll do iandouglas736@gmail.com. Go subscribe. Ooh, that is taking a minute, isn't it? Did I hit a rate limit on Airtable? Bro, these signups are not happening. What happened? All right. Let's go into our inspect tool. Go to console. Failed to load the resource. The server responded with a status of 404. What? Oh, status of 400. So basically what this form is doing is it's hitting a serverless endpoint on DigitalOcean to then go talk to Airtable. So it looks like something is failing on DigitalOcean that I will need to go look at. Thanks for letting me know. Trying to figure out if I want to fix it at this moment or do it a little bit later. After that, it fails. Sir Dies-a-Lot, good to see you in chat as well. James G, good to see you in chat. Let me go answer your question in a sec. Do I have advice for a college student trying to land a software engineering internship for the summer? Best way to prepare and network. Yeah, we can dive in on that one for sure. Okay, I'll go fix the email system later on. Let me go jump in on this question from James, and then we will go take a look at some other stuff here. Just see if there's anything else that I missed in chat before we get to that one. I don't think so. Cool. You'll come back later and sign up. Yeah, I appreciate you letting me know. I need to have some sort of like monitoring system that's like constantly trying that can. Well, actually, a whole bunch of people just showed up in the email thing. But that was actually, no, I take that back. That was a couple of hours ago. So something broke within the last 3 hours. From when I'm seeing other people signing up, it broke about 3 hours ago or sometime after that. So Eric Garcia, good to see you in chat as well. So let me get to this question from James. So we had a question come in chat. One of our users asked, do you have any advice for a college student trying to land a software engineering internship for the summer? What are some best ways to prepare and network? Companies that are looking for internship type roles used to hire for their summer internships in the spring. And so, you know, they wanted enough lead time that they could go through and they could collect all the people that they wanted to interview and get through the interviews so that, you know, hey, now that we're through the interviews, it's summertime and our person can start right away. And then other companies are like, well, we want to beat everybody to the punch. And so we want to like get all the good candidates. So we're going to invite people to those interviews a little bit earlier. And so then those companies started getting like all the really good intern applicants, and everybody else got kind of what was left over. And so other companies are like, well, we'll go earlier than them. And then other companies are like, well, we'll go earlier than them, and we'll go earlier and earlier and earlier. And now summer internship interviews typically now are happening like September, October, November for next summer. It's like, that's a huge amount of time between making a decision of, yes, we want you to come work with us, and actually having you start work with that company. There's like a huge lead time, like 7-8 months sometimes before you actually go start that internship. So it feels weird to me to wait so long, but at the same time, I get, they don't want like all the last minute procrastinators of like, oh, I should probably get that summer internship, so I suppose I should apply for that internship role. I mean, they're probably all taken up by the holiday season at the end of the year. And into the winter, companies stop having as many internship type interviews. So just to kind of set the stage for people that aren't aware of the common sort of university college internship application process. So this specific question is, do I have advice on trying to land an internship for next summer? What are some best ways to prepare and network? The networking aspect is a little more straightforward, where you want to try to find companies who are hiring for interns, and you want to start reaching out to those people now. Always the sooner the better. You want to have time to sort of build up and nurture that professional relationship, where you introduce yourself, you let them know the kinds of things that you're interested in, the kinds of projects that you've been building, even if they're just the academic projects that you've been doing with your school, that's fine. But starting that networking sooner than later is always going to be beneficial for you. From there, then you're going to need to figure out, okay, how do I stand out as an applicant? Part of what's going to make you stand out for an internship are your academics. So you'll want to list out the skills that you know, any academic projects that you've got, and then in your education block, you'll probably want to put like some of the courses that you've taken that are going to be highly relevant to that particular company, and maybe a GPA. Now, it's not always necessary to put a GPA on there, and there are people coming out of boot camps and coding programs like Turing and so on who can also go apply for these internship roles that don't necessarily have like a project portfolio built out yet, or they haven't even finished the program yet to even like go apply for that internship that's not happening for another 7 or 8 months. But when a company opens up an internship role, excuse me, they know that you don't have a huge amount of background in programming. Their expectations are actually fairly low. They do expect that you can code. They do expect that you've got a lot of fundamentals. And so those internship interviews are going to be mostly data structure and algorithm centered, may not be centered as much around go build a full application, where a user can log in and save things in a database. Like, that's not going to be an expectation for an internship role. The internship interviews are going to be more data structure and algorithm based. So the preparation for those internship roles are going to be more about, unfortunately, LeetCode. I've got some YouTube videos that you can go watch on how to do LeetCode in a smarter way. And so you can go check out those videos. And it's really about like, how do you study the strategy of these algorithms and not memorize the syntax of the algorithms, but at least have the high level strategies of how do I do this kind of problem? How do I solve two-pointer problems? How do I solve sliding window problems? That you've got those strategies kind of ready to go. So when you hear a prompt of a problem, you're like, oh yeah, that's a sliding window problem. I know how to do that. That's the level of familiarity that you want to get to. So the more of that data structure and algorithm practice you can get in before those interviews start, again, they could start as early as next month. They could be more like October, November. So it really depends on how much time you have to actually go apply for those internship roles. Now, some companies recognize that university students don't all take the summer break off, and so they have internships running all the time. And the internships are usually 3 to 4 months, and they have an expectation that when you come in, there's going to be some amount of training, but that you're also going to take initiative to go learn things on your own. So being able to demonstrate either through project work or through those initial interviews of, you can kind of point me in the direction, give me a bit of a shove, and I'm going to go learn what you want me to learn. And I'm going to show you how I would demonstrate learning that thing. That can be also where some internship interviews may have kind of a take-home assignment, or something like a take-home assignment where they say, hey, go take a day or two, go research this topic, go build a little something, send it back in. Let us see what you can actually go build on your own without us there sort of helping you through it. That said, companies do want to support you and they do want to help you through things when you're actually on the job, but they do want to know that they don't have to sit next to you all day, every day, showing you every little step of what to go do as part of your job. They expect you're going to have some amount of coding skill, some amount of problem solving, that when you hear a problem, you can break it down into steps, figure out how to solve those steps with code, actually demonstrate putting together a whole working solution, and then go do something with it. You don't have to be an expert level at anything with these internship roles. Again, we expect that your level of knowledge is going to be more limited because you're still in school. You haven't even finished your school program. So you've only probably learned like introductory level kinds of things. Now, there are people that have asked this question on the stream before, where it's like, how do I go get an internship if I'm still in my first year or second year of school? It's going to be a little bit harder to get those internships because their expectation is like, well, if you've only been in school for, a year, how much of those fundamentals do you even have? As opposed to like, oh, you've been doing this for a long, long time, or not a long, long time, but like you're in your second year, third year. What's the expectation there about having enough of that fundamental knowledge to demonstrate that you can do the job? So more internships are going to be open probably after your second year, like after finishing your second year. Your third and fourth year, depending on your school, may get into more advanced topics or more niche topics where you're really getting into more of the specifics about like particular topics like machine learning or data science or scalability or whatever. You're probably going to be focusing more on those advanced classes, and so the internships that you apply for are going to be more focused around those bigger topics. When you get the second year, third year internships, though, you may not have focused in a particular area yet. And so as a company, my expectation, again, is that you've just got kind of these core fundamentals going. So from there, I would say, like, what other advice? So you're probably not going to have very much in the way of projects. So building out that resume is going to be a little bit harder. You'll be able to show some of the technical skills of things that you've learned. You're probably going to want to show on the resume a little bit more about what you're actually learning in school. Like, these are the courses that I've actually taken. If I go look at this resume sample here, and for those listening to the podcast audio, I'm sharing my screen where I'm showing an example of a resume, and you can find this through the website. You can actually go to techinterview.guide, and you can see an example resume on there if you want to go check this out. But what I'm showing on the stream is in the education portion where you list bullet points about this is what I learned at my particular school. You'll probably want to expand this a lot more for internship roles where you talk more about what you've actually learned at school, because you're not going to have a huge section full of projects where you can say, oh, I've built out this whole application. You'll have some amount of project work, but it's not going to be as deep or as rich as other students coming out of like a code school program where they're learning how to combine all of these tools together. For most university and college degrees, especially around computer science, you're learning how to go build those tools. So you'll have project work, but it's going to be project work about, building out these kinds of tools. And that's okay to list, but if you don't feel that you've got enough project work on there to fill out a one-page resume, then you can expand more on the education portion. And tell me more about the classes that you have. And again, if you can put a GPA on there, I would recommend it. One piece of advice that I've heard is only put the GPA on the resume if your GPA is over 3.5. If it's under 3.5, don't put the GPA on there. I kind of agree with that, because you don't want to focus on negative things of like, oh yeah, I'm taking these classes, but I'm barely passing. You don't want to do that on your resume. So I would say if your GPA is less than 3.5, don't put it on the resume at all. If it's over 3.5, you could probably put the GPA on there. Some people will straight up ask like, hey, I see you're going to such and such a school. What's your GPA? At that point, you can tell them. I always recommend be honest about it. They don't really have a good way to verify it, but they might ask for verification, in which case you don't want to get caught being untruthful with them, or that's going to, be an immediate disqualification for just about any job out there. So as far as other preparation, as far as networking goes, I showed a tool, and I'll put this link in the description as well. But there's this tool that you can go look at, which I'll put in chat. And I'll put it in the description here as well, where you can actually narrow down like a particular company or type of skill or the type of role. So I can put in here that I'm looking for an internship for, say, Python, and I can click on this button. So the site is called hiring-search.fangpath.com, and FAANG with 2 A's. And when you submit that form, it's basically rebuilding a whole Google search for you to go find LinkedIn profiles of people who are hiring for the kinds of jobs that you just put in that form. So in this case, I'm looking for Python internships, and it's trying to go find, okay, well, you know, in this case, it found a hiring manager for Appellation.ai, and it looks like they're hiring interns. So now you've actually got links directly to LinkedIn, where you can then go network with those folks. Send out a message to them, say, I'm looking to apply for internships later in the fall for next summer. I'd like to start meeting people and networking now. I've got some questions about your company if you've got a minute to talk. And then if they respond and say, yeah, I've got some time, then you want to send them a very specific short list of questions. Like I would say, start the conversation with like 2, at most 3 questions, where you've given some thought into what kinds of questions you want to find out about that company. And if you want, I've got a YouTube video that you can go check out on my YouTube channel about company research and how to actually research a company to go find these kinds of questions that you want to ask when you're doing the networking. And then from there, actually getting the interview is up to you. And then from there, getting through the interview is also up to you as well. And so having those fundamentals and having enough study and practice ready to go will help you get through the interview from there. But I'm happy to help at any stage along the way, whether it's preparing that resume, writing up a cover letter, how do you explain projects and things like that. You're always welcome to come back to the live stream, and I'm happy to help people out on that kind of stuff. Cool. Thanks for asking the question, James. Appreciate it. Let's see what else I missed in chat. Sir Dies a Lot. Good to see you in chat. Haven't seen you in a bit. I was offered the ability to do a master's plus a GA appointment full-time while working full-time by my college. What would be the best way to pitch the proposition to my employer? They have me doing machine learning. So you're offered the ability to do a master's plus GA appointment. Let me know what GA appointment means. Full-time while working full-time by my college. So the college has offered you a master's appointment, I guess, while you're also working full-time. That's a heavy load, I'm not going to lie, to take on a full-time master's degree, and the GA is graduate assistantship. Okay. They pay for the degree. I mean, that's great. I mean, the fact that they're going to pay for your degree is fantastic. But doing a full-time degree and full-time work, that's a lot to put on your plate. I would say, if you really want to go that route, if that's really where you want to take your career, I'm not going to try to dissuade you or encourage you either way, because that's a decision you need to make. If it were me, and this was something that I wanted to pursue, I would have that conversation with the employer and say, this is a goal that I have. I want to get my master's degree. I've actually been chatting with this college. They've offered to pay for my master's degree, but I don't want to stop working here. Can we work something out where maybe I have like a little bit reduced workload so that I can go get this master's degree? It's something that's really important to me. Your employer may have tuition reimbursement. Even though your tuition's being covered, they may have other reimbursement that they would be willing to compensate or recompensate you for. If you do have any other expenses related to school, if there's books or materials and things like that, they may reimburse those costs. So that would be something to talk about with your employer. When you're talking to your employer about it, though, it's the same kind of value proposition as when you're interviewing with them in the first place. Like, why do I care as a hiring manager? Why is this master's degree going to help me? Yes, like that employer might absolutely love you and they don't want to lose you and they might love what you do. But if you need like a reduced workload in order to go get a master's degree, and that master's degree isn't going to help us in some way, it's like we might, if you're really, really likable, then yeah, we'll probably let you have reduced work or whatever, but that may come with reduced pay as well. If you're only going to work 30 hours a week, suddenly you're not working full-time hours, we might have to cut your benefits and so on. But to put the expectation on you that you can still work 40 hours and get a master's degree, like I said, it's going to be a pretty heavy load depending on other life responsibilities and so on that you have. It might be a tough thing to balance, but that's your decision. If you're in a position right now where you can do that and that's what you want to pursue, then yeah, go for it. But I would have the conversation with the employer and say, I want to go get the master's degree. I think it's going to help my career in this way and that way. This is the value that it's going to bring to the company. If I do a master's thesis on this topic or this topic, that's going to be aligned with these projects that we have going on. Would it be okay if I even do a master's thesis project about these things that we have going on? You always want to make sure that you've got permission from them to actually publicize what you're doing as part of a master's thesis, because those papers can be made public later on, as I understand it. But you can talk to your employer or say, like, I really want to get this master's degree. Can you help me come up with a project idea that would be beneficial to the company, but also help me get this master's degree? Figure out some kind of partnership there. Again, the worst they'll say is no. Are they going to fire you for it? Probably not. If you've been there long enough and they really like you, they're not going to be like, all right, well, enjoy your master's degree. You're not going to work here anymore. But they may also have the same kind of conversation that I've just had here, where they're going to be like, full-time master's degree and full-time work, that's going to be a lot to take on. Like, are you sure you're ready for that? So they may have some feedback for you there as well. But have the conversation with your employer and ask, can I have reduced work for a period of time? But depending on how long you expect that master's degree to take, if it's going to take a year, 2 years, 3 years, you're going to have to figure out from your employer, like, is this really something that we're all willing to work together on in order for me to go get this master's degree? Again, if the master's degree benefits them in some way, they're far more likely to be agreeable to it. It's not guaranteed, but they'll probably be more amenable to the idea. So the master's will take 12 months exactly. So if you know the timeline, then have that chat with your employer and say, I expect this is going to take a year. If I start in November, it's going to go through next November. Is there something we can do as far as work responsibilities and so on? You're currently the only machine learning engineer there and the only one that can maintain the program. So, I mean, you've got some job security, but that doesn't necessarily make you irreplaceable. They could say, yeah, go ahead and start the master's degree, but we are going to need to replace your full-time effort because you're the only one that can do this. And if you're in the middle of an exam and something breaks, we can't pull you out of that exam to go fix some code. But we may not have hours to wait for you to go finish all of that and then come back to work. So again, you're going to have to figure that out with them, or you might have to train some other people to help take care of some of the critical portions that if you do need to be out working on an assignment or taking an exam or something like that, that they have coverage. Again, these are things that you need to think about as far as that value proposition to the company and say, hey, I realize this is going to take me away from critical functions here at work. I want to make sure that I'm available as much as possible. These are the hours that I'm thinking about. What do you think? And have that conversation. Make it a collaborative effort. If you just walk in and be like, this is what I'm doing, this is my schedule when I'm available, then it doesn't allow them a lot of flexibility. But if you ask them for help on what kinds of projects can I do, how can I reduce that workload and so on, they'll be a lot more amenable to that. Give me 1 sec. I will be right back. Cool, I'm back. It's a tricky situation. I mean, it's not really that tricky of a situation. I think it's just something where you have to have that conversation with your employer. There's a lot of companies will be open to the idea, again, if it's something that's going to benefit them, like if the master's degree is in machine learning and that's going to take your ML skills to a whole other level, they'll be like, yeah, go get that master's degree. It's only going to take a year and we're going to get 3 times the output out of you. Then yeah, I can't see why they wouldn't be open to that idea. But it starts with conversation. A lot of these kinds of things come down to communication, how you talk to them about it. But I would do it in a way that includes them in the decision making instead of just showing up and announcing what you're doing. If they feel like they're part of that conversation, I think they'll be a lot more agreeable to it. Cool. Let me jump back through chat. I think that's all I missed in chat. Eric asked a question. Hey, Eric, let me know if you're still in chat. I'll answer your question too. What are communities that junior devs could join to learn from? For example, Women Who Code, Recoding Bootcamp, and so on. Yeah, I can totally get in on some of that. So Sir Dizelot was also saying, I was thinking I could stay as a co-op at my employer so that the hours and workload could be more flexible. Yeah. So again, have that conversation with them. I mean, pitch those as the ideas. Like, what if I do something like this? They might be very, very open to that. The position they have lined up for me after I wrap up my bachelor's is a feature owner for machine learning. So, I mean, it sounds like the company really likes you. They want you to be in charge of that stuff. So I think it's a great way to have that conversation with them and talk about what's important to you and how it's going to benefit them. Because again, it needs to come down to like what are they going to get out of it? So you could say like, hey, you want me to be in charge of this machine learning thing? Here's some things that I can do. You know, this is what I'm thinking about. I've got the tuition covered, so you don't even have to reimburse any tuition, but it's going to make me better. It's only going to take a year. You know, what can we do in the meantime to make sure that I can finish that program and, you know, help out here in my role as best as possible. Have the conversation. Cool. Let's dive in on Eric's question here. Let me go back and find it. Got another question come in from chat saying, hi everyone, what are some communities where junior developers could join and learn from? For example, Women Who Code, Free Code Bootcamp, local software meetup groups, and so on. To start out with, those are 3 fantastic communities that they can get involved in. There are other communities like 100 Devs that they can be involved in, but that community might expect that you're actually taking their program. Local meetup groups are a fantastic way to meet people and to learn and grow, but those meetups may generally be like, hey, we're only going to meet once a month and we're going to talk about very specific topics for an hour or 2, and then that's it. So it may be a little bit harder to find learning opportunities at meetups, but meetups are a great way to kind of give back to the community and say, hey, I'm in the middle of learning this, you know, particular technology from Free Code Camp. Here's my experience with it. Here's what I've been learning. This is what I've built. Do that as like a 5-minute, 10-minute kind of lightning talk. And you can basically walk into just about any meetup and give that as a talk. Now, some people don't like the idea of public speaking, but it really gets your name out there. And if you're looking for an entry-level position, it's a fantastic way to then wrap up that top and say, that was my experience, appreciate it. By the way, I'm also looking for a job. If anybody's hiring, these are the skills that I have, and kind of pitch that as you're, you know, walking away from the microphone or however you're doing your presentation, to let people know that you're actively job hunting. It's a great way to kind of get people interested in who you are and what you've been doing. But showing that level of experience where you're willing to get up and give a talk, there's kind of this psychological thing that happens in humans that if you see somebody stand up and say, this is my experience and this is how I built a thing, we kind of impart on them some level of expertise in that topic. Doesn't mean necessarily that they are absolute expert at that thing, but we kind of view them as like, okay, well, they're smart enough at this thing to like get up and give a talk about it, so they must have, you know, some amount of knowledge in there. That can really stand out to potential employers or, you know, other people working on engineering teams, team leads, and so on. All those folks tend to go to these meetups. So I think it's a fantastic way to network with people, not necessarily for a learning opportunity, but it's a great way to get your name out there. Online communities like free boot camps, or freecodecamp.org, I think. There are a lot of online communities where you can go learn content, learn curriculum. I would say as long as it's a structured curriculum, I think you'll do well if you've got a structure to follow. If you just kind of say like, oh, I want to go learn web development. It's like, let me go Google, how do I learn web development? You know, you'll find some links, but it might be kind of scattered as far as the structure of go learn things in this sort of semi-logical order from like the basics and the fundamentals and like building on that knowledge to progress in that skill to get to where you can actually go build an application. As far as other networks and so on, there are a lot of Discord communities out there where people love to have newcomers drop in and ask questions and you know, talk about their projects and talk about what they're building and have mentorship opportunities available, that sort of thing. So there are Discord communities that you can join. Now, I'm not aware of any sort of like Discord search engine where you can say like, go find me all the Discord communities that have to do with Python. Maybe somebody somewhere has built something like that, but I don't know of any. So you could figure out how to sharpen your Google skills and figure out like, are there Slack communities or Discord communities around things like that. One of my favorites is Virtual Coffee. I think it's virtualcoffee.io. Let me go check that real quick and I'll drop that in chat. Virtualcoffee.io. Yep. I'll drop that in chat and I'll drop it in the description down below as well. So virtualcoffee.io is a great place to just connect with people and say, this is what I'm learning. Are there other people learning this kind of thing? And it's just a community around developers. And it's about like, hey, can we get together for a virtual coffee? They have little co-working groups that you can get on where they have like a lot of people connect and do that sort of thing. You can also put content out on LinkedIn and say, hey, I'm interested in co-working with somebody on a project. If anybody's available, this is what I'm working through. These are the things that I'm learning. I'm looking to connect with people to sort of help with the programming aspect of it. If you're comfortable being on a camera, there are a lot of people live streaming right now, especially here on Twitch, where they're live streaming about the curriculum that they're learning, and they can kind of build up their own community at that point. Or you can be part of someone else's community and say, well, I'm still going to keep live streaming. It is a little more vulnerable, and sometimes you can be really subjected to what we call backseat driving, where as you're working through code, your chat blows up with like everybody telling you how they think you should do it. But again, that's how you need to figure out how you want to manage your own community at that point and say like, hey, I'm willing to take occasional ideas, but I'm not looking for backseat driving. You know, I want to be able to work through this. If you've got suggestions or a pointer on like, hey, go Google this term to help point me in the right direction. Like I want to be able to go learn this on my own, but I want to, you know, just practice coding. I think that there's an interesting level of accountability that happens when you're doing learning in public and doing live coding like that, where you stay focused on topic. And yeah, you can interact with your chat a little bit, but I think it'll help keep you focused on getting into that curriculum and learning that content and so on. Does that work for everybody? No, not everybody likes being on a camera. There are ways of like getting little virtual avatars, or you can share your coding screen. You don't even have to have the camera on you necessarily, but you just show your coding screen and maybe the chat window or something like that. You can set that kind of thing up if you want to do that. It's not necessary, but that's another way that you could do it and build out your own community. I think it's better though if you can find someone else's community and figure out, okay, who are the other people that are out there that are working on things like me, especially the like me portion of like, I want to find other people that are like me, especially if you're coming from like a historically marginalized group where you want to find other people from your ethnicity, your background, your socioeconomic status. Like you want to find other people like you, then you're going to have to hunt around for those communities a little bit. Some of these communities, though, that I've already mentioned, and some that this person in chat already mentioned, like Free Code Camp and Virtual Coffee, you could say, hey, by the way, I'm looking for a specific community about this type of background or this walk of life or this ethnicity. Does anybody know any more specific groups that I can go join where I'm literally around people like me? Because I want to be around other people like me in tech that I can learn from their experience about, you know, how did you handle this or that kind of aspect of working in the tech industry. I think that that's an equally important part of community, and not just I need help with a project, but also I want to be able to talk to people like me who come from my walk of life or my type of background, and I want to find out what it was like for them to get into the tech industry and what they deal with on a day-to-day basis. I think that that's also a wise way of spending time in community. So those are my thoughts. If anybody else has ideas around online communities that you've been a part of, please drop them in chat as well, and let our user know. And if you're listening to this or watching this on YouTube later, listening to the podcast audio, I'm always happy to take feedback. If you want to drop in a comment, other online communities that you're familiar with, I'll make sure to pass them on to this person. Cool. Thanks for the question, Eric. Let's see, what else have I been missing in chat here? B Gross says I use Slack for JavaScript. Yeah, I mean, if you've got specific Slack communities that you're a part of, B Gross Design, feel free to drop those links in here, or just the name of the Slack community, and then, you know, maybe we can figure out like how do we get an invite into those communities. 100 Devs is a really, really supportive group, and there are thousands and thousands of people going through that program. but their expectation in their Discord community is that you're probably taking their program, and so to just show up as a rando stranger and be like, hey, I'm working on some completely unrelated kind of topic, like they learn full stack JavaScript, and if you show up and be like, hey, I'm doing some code in Rust, has anybody got some help, you're probably not going to get as many people that want to help. There are still mentors in their Discord community that may reach out and help, but it may be harder to find help in unrelated sorts of communities. Same as, B Gross is saying, I use a Slack community for asking JavaScript questions. If I drop in there and say, hey, I'm trying to write this thing in Go, is anybody able to help me out? Unless there's someone in there that happens to be doing Go, it's probably not the best community. So trying to find a community that's focused on the technology that you're learning is probably a good way to kind of get started searching for those communities. And then from there, you can reach out and say, like, these are the other kinds of communities I'm trying to find if anybody has ideas. Cool. I turned the sticker overlay back on. It was like covering up my face, so I shut it off there for a little bit just so I could get through that one question. I may figure out, like, when I hit the button to start and stop a question, I might hide that overlay as well, just so people watching the video later on, they don't see the dragon like right over my face, because I didn't want to have to like shift over here to like sit in an uncomfortable way just because there was a sticker in the way. But cool. Let's keep going through Discord. We got a lot of backlog questions to go through. Let me mark that last one as being answered. And we'll jump on to the next one here. And as always, if you've got questions, please drop them in chat. Probably going to start collecting resumes again for another resume review. Next Thursday, we've got a guest on the stream. The Thursday after that, what week is this? This is the 25th. Next week, we've got Oliver on the stream. The week after that is the 8th. And I do not have a guest lined up on the 8th. So I think September 8th we'll aim for resume reviews. So if you really want a resume review and you want it to be public, you can send over the resume over to this link, which I hit in there twice. And all these links will be in the YouTube description down below. But you can send over a resume review and we'll do them live on September 8th. So start sending in those resumes. We'll get them batched up and we'll go through a whole bunch of those on the 8th. So if you want a resume review for free, I do them on the stream. If you want them to be done private, I'm happy to do it private offline. I do ask for $50 just to cover my time, but that $50 all goes into this fundraiser that you see here at the top of the screen, where all that money is being matched by myself as well. So I don't keep that $50. That $50 is going into this pot of money. I'm adding another $50 to it. So please know that whenever you donate, subscribe, anything like that to my stream, all that money goes in the Diversity in Tech fundraiser, and then I'm also matching those funds. So yeah, just please know that. I actually built a little chat command called Don't Sub. If you want to have an impact on this, I would rather people donate. When you subscribe, I only get half of that money from the subscription, and Twitch also waits like sometimes more than a month to actually send me that money. So they're holding on to all of that money for a month, and then at the end of that, they only give me half of that money anyway. So when you pay $5 for a subscription here, when I don't even really have ads, other than the pre-roll ad when you first join, I don't run regular ads. I do all my content for free. Everything on the website's free. There's no paywall anywhere. Even on YouTube, I don't do any ads on YouTube. Once I hit 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, I may enable some ads on there. Again, it's only going to benefit this. It's not to annoy people. It's just to benefit the Diversity in Tech fundraiser. But I have an exclamation point money page. I don't have a button on my Stream Deck for it. But if you go to this URL, you can go see exactly how I make my money as a streamer. That's obviously all part-time because I work full-time in the tech industry. But any money that I make as a streamer goes into this pot. And I actually break it down on that page. This is how much I get from subs. This is how much I get from people cheering bits. And here's what I get from Prime subscriptions. And here's what I get from ads and so on. I detail all of that just so you know that this money is legit, PayPal donations and things like that coming in. All that goes into that pot, and then I'm also matching that money. So I outline all that on that webpage. I think I've found 1 or 2 groups that we're going to donate this next batch of money to. So I'm hoping through September, October, as we get into kind of the giveaway kickoff for the end of the year, I'm hoping that we can really substantially raise this up. as much as possible. I want to get close to that $1,500 by the end of December so that we can give that money away in December or like first thing in the new year. And then we're going to reset all of that for all of next year. And we'll just have like a running 2023 fundraiser thing for the whole year. Alrighty, let's see. LinkedIn just beeped at me. Okay, so that was unrelated. Cool, whole bunch of people trying to connect. Awesome. I will go deal with that later on. I usually like to watch like Twitter and LinkedIn and stuff like that, just in case anybody asks a question privately on those platforms. I'm Ian Douglas 736 on all those platforms, so you're welcome to connect with me on any of those platforms and send me messages. I'm happy to address the question there, but I do occasionally bring those questions over to the Discord community where I then answer them here on the stream, kind of like I've been doing tonight. Speaking of which, let's dive in on another question. And if you've got other questions, drop them in chat. We'll address those as we go too. All right, another anonymous question from our Discord community. Why do interviews ask about data structures like linked lists and binary trees, or algorithms that involve things like recursion if they're not actually used on the job very often? In my 26-year career as a developer, I've implemented recursion twice. I've implemented what we call a prefix tree or a trie one time in my professional career for something like an autocomplete. Now, that doesn't mean that companies don't ever use these things. Some companies are very involved in these kinds of data structures and these kinds of algorithms. So it really depends a little bit on what kind of job you're applying for. If you're applying for a job which is doing a lot of low-level programming, then things like recursion and some of these more advanced algorithms and data structures are far more relevant. And this is why coming out of like a CS degree program, you're more likely to get these LeetCode style challenges than if you're coming out of a boot camp. But coming out of a boot camp or a coding program doesn't mean you're not going to get these LeetCode style questions, because that's how some people know how to interview, or that's the only way that some people know how to interview, is by giving a technical challenge. But I believe very strongly, if you've spent any time watching my stream, I believe that interviews need to be catered more to what you're actually doing on the job. That the technical challenge that they give you or a take-home assignment that they give you needs to be highly relevant to what you're actually going to be doing on the job, and not just a LeetCode style problem where you've got to try to figure out what that prompt is asking you to build and go build like a one function algorithm and then you're done. So with that in mind, I think the idea here is, you know, why do we have to do like linked lists in interviews if we don't actually use them on the job? Part of what I'm interested in seeing as a hiring manager is how much have you studied these things? Because it might not be, hey, go write me some code that uses the linked list. It might be, hey, what do you know about linked lists? What do you know about arrays? Why would I want to use a linked list over an array? Are there scenarios where I would want to use a linked list instead of an array? What are the benefits? What are the disadvantages of that? Are there kinds of algorithms that do better with one data structure versus another data structure? There's a problem that I outlined on a previous stream, recent stream actually, where we were talking about a particular technical challenge where I kind of use very vague wording and say, you've got a group of numbers and I want you to find any two numbers in that group that add up to a target. So I'm going to give you that group of numbers and I'm going to say the target is 13. I want you to find any two numbers in that group that add up to 13. Now I've said very vaguely that you have a group of numbers. I haven't told you how they're grouped. A lot of people jump to an assumption that it's probably in an array. You can solve that problem with an array. You look at a value in the array and then you scan the rest of the array for the other number that, when added to that first one, adds up to your target. You can do it faster and more efficiently if you use a hash or a dictionary instead, where the numbers are the keys and the value is like just a true or false, or put them in a set. So it's telling me a little bit of like, what have you studied when it comes to data structures and algorithms? Do you know why you want to use a particular algorithm over another? So these aren't generally used on the job as much, but there are scenarios where I would want to use a linked list instead of an actual array. building out a stack, for example. It's more efficient to use a linked list where I can allocate a node, I add it on the end of the linked list, and when I'm done, I just delete that node. Doing that on an array over and over again under the hood could trigger something for the interpreter or the code to actually do what we call garbage collection, where it says, okay, go throw that whole array away and go make another one, like memory copy everything in. So if you add a whole bunch of things in, it might over allocate memory. Once you start deleting things from there, it might make a whole new memory copy and like free up all that, previously, pre-allocated memory and so on. And so doing all this like extra work under the hood can slow down your application. Where using a linked list, you're allocating memory that doesn't have to be contiguous or like all one big block in memory. You can put these nodes anywhere you want in memory, and the software is going to take care of that for you. But when you put things in an array, they have to be all like next to each other in memory. That's just how arrays work. And so a lot of asking those kinds of questions are really asking you, like, what do you know about the advantages and disadvantages of using particular data structures? Have you even studied that? It's okay not to have an answer, but that's a lot of what we're looking for in those interviews. So is it a bad thing that they're asking about data structures and algorithms that don't actually get used on the job? Depending on the job. I mean, if it's a low-level programming job, those data structures and algorithms are going to be far more relevant. If you're building like end-user applications, especially things in JavaScript, like if you're a front-end developer, should you worry about recursion? Should you worry about all these, bigger data structures and so on? Maybe not. Probably not. You could still get asked, though, because they want to know what you've studied. They want to know the depth of your knowledge in a particular area, and that's part of the interview, is to have you demonstrate your depth of knowledge in a particular area. And if you don't know how to do something, that's okay. You don't have to be an expert at everything we give you, but we hope you're at least going to try. We hope that you're actually going to, take a crack at it, try to break the problem down into steps and see, how do I solve each of these steps now that I've identified what all the smaller portions of that problem are going to be. How can I go solve each of those to come up with a whole solution to what it is you're asking me to build? So a lot of it comes down to the problem solving and decision making, but that stems from knowing why I want to use a particular data structure or why I want to use a particular algorithm. It might be from a memory capacity point of view. It might be from how much CPU time it takes to process something. Because that problem that I mentioned earlier with a group of numbers, you can solve it with an array, but it'll be an n-squared algorithm when we talk about big O notation. If you do it with a hash or a dictionary, it's an ON solution. Worst case, you pass over all those keys one time. But if you do it in an array, you take the first number out of the array and you got to scan the rest of the array. And then you advance to the next number and you scan the rest of the array. And then you move to the next number and you scan the rest of the array. And so it's much, much slower because you're going over that data over and over and over and over again. And so we call that an n-squared algorithm. So if the data set is small enough, it doesn't matter. Like if you've only got 100 things in that array, it's honestly going to operate as quickly as doing it in a dictionary. Now, the actual number of steps that the CPU is taking is a lot more, but relatively speaking, they're both taking like a fraction of a millisecond to go solve that. But when you've got millions of things in that group, it's going to have a much bigger impact. If I've got 1 million things in there, 1 million squared is 1 trillion operations. That's a lot longer to process than just going over 1 million things. But if I've only got 100 things, processing 100 elements one time and processing 10,000 elements, they're both going to run in a fraction of a millisecond. Nobody's going to notice, like no human is going to notice the difference in that. So is it a bad thing that companies ask these kinds of questions in an interview? No, not at all. It does feel weird, though, to be asked questions that are not going to be relevant to a job, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. My job as an interviewer is to determine the range of your knowledge, how well you know those concepts, and then to take that back to the team and see if that's what we want on the team. If there's something you don't know, that's okay. But our hope is that depending on the kind of work that you're going to be doing, that our interview process is asking enough of the fundamentals of the skills that we want you to have that we can make a good assessment about your technical knowledge and capabilities. Hey, Kisu, good to see you in chat as well. I'm kind of sad I didn't. Oh, you didn't get the job you were interviewing for, but I moved to a bigger city and I'm optimistic this is the place I'm going to break through. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, Kisu. Did they give you any kind of feedback, or did you ask them for feedback on what happened, why you didn't get the job? I think it's okay to ask them for feedback and say, like, hey, you rejected me. Can you tell me what I can do better? Just let them know, hey, I really want to improve. I would love to reapply in the future. What can I do better next time? If they write back and say, you did everything right, we just found somebody with more experience, then the only thing you can do better is go get some experience. Of course, that's easier said than done. But if they'll give you any kind of feedback, I would absolutely ask them for feedback. All right, let me go mark that question as done, and we'll move on to the next one. This next question came in from Discord. And basically the person was saying, as a hiring manager, because I've been a hiring manager, they said, as a hiring manager, is it more important that I come across as being likable in the interview, or that I have all the technical skill that you want in a candidate? So just to give a little bit of context there. As a hiring manager, I need to do what's best for the company. So I need to hire somebody with technical skill, but I also need to think of my team and make sure that I'm hiring somebody that the rest of the team is going to get along with. So it doesn't really lean all one way or the other. There's definitely a balance between culture fit and technical skill. I've shared on the live stream in the past how I interviewed at Yahoo long time ago. This is back in 2005, 2006, something like that. And I was interviewing and I was doing really well on the technical aspects of the interview. I was answering all their questions. They only stumped me one time. And then they started asking me questions about football. And I'm originally from Canada, where football wasn't as big a deal as something like hockey or basketball. But even basketball wasn't really a professional sport then. And they were asking me all these football questions, and I got kind of confused. I'm like, what's with all the football questions? And they said, well, you're interviewing with the fantasy football team at Yahoo. And I couldn't answer any question about football. I was doing great on the technical side, but I didn't know anything about football. I didn't care about football. And they could tell by the types of answers they were asking about, like, who won the last Super Bowl? I'm like, I have no idea. I don't watch the Super Bowl. I watch it for the ads, like, 90% of the population. And so they're like, okay, well, you're not a good fit for the job. And I didn't get the job because I wasn't a culture fit at all, like not even remotely close. But on a technical level, I did everything right. But they basically said, you're not a culture fit, so you don't get the job. I've been in other situations where I was the interviewer, where the person came in, they had all the technical skill in the world, but they were also a big arrogant jerk about being the smartest person in the room. And so we also didn't hire them. I have had interviews where the candidate really stood out, like, oh, that person's like really nice. Like they've got a really strong interest in learning, and they're really passionate about what we do as a company. Like they really stood out as a candidate, but couldn't write a line of code, couldn't debug a thing. It's like, well, I also can't hire you. It's one thing to be likable, but I need to hire somebody with at least some amount of fundamental skill. Otherwise, I'm putting a much larger burden on my team to have to teach you and train you more about the job than what I hope you bring as a skill to the job. Doesn't mean you have to know everything about everything in order to go get a job. There are things that we're going to have an expectation that you don't have answers for, that you're not going to know, and that's okay. But we hope that you're bringing more that you do know than what you don't know. If it's something like, I understand what it is you're trying to solve, and I've solved problems like it, but I don't know that particular programming language, that's fine. We'll teach you the programming language. If you say, hey, I've done relational database stuff using MySQL, but I've never done Postgres, like, that's fine. We'll teach you Postgres. But if it's like, yeah, I've never done Git, it's like, okay, we'll teach you how to do Git. But if you say, I don't know Git or the programming language or how to build that kind of app, and I have no idea what a database is, It's like, why are we having this conversation? If you're not bringing any skill that we need, we're going to have to train you on all of that stuff. There's a balance there. If you could be the most likable person in the world, but if you don't have some amount of the technical skill, I can't in good conscience hire you, because I have a responsibility to the business to bring the best person to the team. The best person is not necessarily just really well liked and really well thought of. You need to have some amount of skill for what we're doing. And this applies no matter whether it's a technical job or not. You have to have some amount of the skill or an aptitude for learning that thing. You need to be able to demonstrate that you can learn a particular skill in order to go get that job. Now, that's not to say you can't ever go get a job where you know nothing. I mean, I think of my first job getting out, working at, I think it was a Wendy's restaurant. I didn't know anything about cooking hamburgers or making salads or making a baked potato. Like, yeah, I'd been around my own kitchen at home a little bit, but I didn't know how to make hamburgers for 50 people at a time, because it's lunchtime or dinner time and there's like tons of people in line and going through the drive-through. Like, I can make a burger. I don't know anything about how to make 50 burgers. It's like, okay, we'll teach you how to do that. And so there are jobs out there where their whole thing is like, yeah, we're going to train you on absolutely everything that you need to do. But a lot of jobs in the tech industry are not going to be that flexible where they're willing to teach you everything that you need to know. You need to have some amount of skill that you can demonstrate as part of the interview process just to go get that job. So there's a balance in there. Where that balances one way or the other is going to depend on the company. But I don't know very many companies who would be willing to say like, hey, you're an amazing person. Everybody on the team really likes you, wants to hang out with you. They enjoy chatting with you. You don't have any of the skill whatsoever that we're looking for, but we're going to go ahead and hire you anyway. That's going to be an extremely rare opportunity. Same way on the flip side of that, if you're the smartest person, but nobody wants to work with you, it would be doing my team a disservice and a company a disservice by bringing you on the team only to have to, like, a couple of months later, or maybe not even that long, say, hey, you know what? Nobody likes working with you, because it's a lot harder to correct behavioral aspects and communication aspects than to teach you on technical gaps. But again, we don't want to have to teach you everything at a technical level. We want you to bring some amount of skill. Every company is going to be a little different, but I think it's going to be a balance of the two and not one or the other. Old Curmudgeon 3DP, good to see you in chat. Mine expects you to learn and train off the clock. Oof. Yeah, I don't like that. I think if they expect you to learn a skill, you should have time on the clock to go learn the thing if they really care about you as an employee. I think it shows good faith as an employer to say, you know, we like you as a person and you have some amount of that skill. So we're going to allocate like some amount of your time to actually go learn what you need as part of the job, as opposed to you need to go learn all of that stuff on your own at your own expense. I think it's a rough way of doing it for sure. I've certainly been at a lot of companies where they expect that you're going to figure out how and when to go learn the skill that you need that you don't have for the job. But I think in recent years in the tech industry, I think companies are a lot more flexible around the idea of like, okay, we don't expect that you're going to go become an expert in this on your own time, you know, all evening, every evening, Monday through Friday, and by next Monday you'll be an expert. It's like, you know, let me go sign you up for a class. And, you know, I would rather do that than have you get frustrated and quit. I would rather pay for a $500 class for you to go take a class and like get up to speed a little bit faster, where you've got like an educator showing you things as opposed to going and learning on your own. I would rather get you an actual training program of some kind and get you up to speed faster than watch you struggle, or, you know, using Google and Stack Overflow where you might be learning a bad practice or something like that. This is my take as a hiring manager. All right, well, I'm going to keep going through these Discord questions for a little while yet. If you've got questions in chat, you're absolutely welcome to drop those in. Again, if you want to ask a question anonymously, you can send a whisper over to my chat bot. It'll show up in chat as an anonymous question, so you're more than welcome to ask things in there. I am du jour. Thanks for the follow. Appreciate that. Thanks for the follow. Always appreciate new folks coming by. Let us know where you're from. Let us know how you found the channel and stuff like that. We're building up our own little community here, and we also have a Discord community. So I keep talking about the Discord community, but didn't actually drop the link in there. So if you want to join us on Discord, you're welcome to. I've got a channel in there for anonymous questions. You're welcome to send me messages on Discord, LinkedIn, Twitter. So all the social channels here, you can send me messages on any of those platforms. I'll put the stuff in that anonymous questions channel myself, removing your name and removing context and things like that from it. And then, when I have a Q&A session like this, I'll go through and just ask a whole bunch of these questions so that we've got them to kind of parse out later on and make shorter YouTube videos and podcast audio and stuff like that out of them. I'd love to stay your beat. Have a great stream. Thanks for dropping by. Appreciate you coming by. All right, let's see. Did I miss anything else in chat? So Kisu, back to not getting that job. Let me know whether you asked them for feedback. I'm always curious whether folks ask for feedback and what kind of feedback the company gave. So let us know in chat. But I'm sorry that you didn't get the job. It's disappointing when you go through the interview process and then you don't get the job. I'm also curious, were you at the end of the process, do you think? Like, were you in like the final rounds and then didn't get the job? Or was it fairly early in the process, you think? Because I'm starting to kind of wrap up some of the content on the website. It's not ready to publish yet around if you get this far and this is where you drop off in the interview, here's, maybe these are the things that you need to go work on just to help people out there. All right, huge block of text from Kisu. So you were typing while I was asking all that. I think it was age, because this was an internship, more suitable for a young person fresh out of college. I was expecting that outcome because the job was not that interesting for me. I'm now learning React, and I would never give up trying because work in tech is the ideal thing for me because I have a disability. I'm also loving everything I'm learning. That's awesome. You've got a great heart and a great attitude about it. And I think that's fantastic. It's disappointing to hear that you think it was age related. You said it was like an internship. Was it an actual intern role, or was it an entry-level role and like you're like a little bit older or something like that? It's hard to tell exactly why you got rejected from a job. I would always ask the company for feedback and just say, hey, I want to do better. I want to grow. I want to figure out like what I can do better. If you can't share feedback about what I can do better, can you let me know what I did do well? A lot of companies are happy to share the positives. And from the positives that they share, you can kind of infer what they didn't talk about and say, hey, they said I'm a really good communicator and that I do really good at breaking a problem down, but they didn't say anything about my coding ability. Maybe it was something about your code. If they say, hey, you did a really good job with the problem solving and you wrote your code really, really well, but you just weren't a fit for the team. Maybe it was a behavioral question, or maybe it's a culture fit kind of thing. Again, those are questions that you can ask, but you can kind of infer a little bit as you ask different people on the team for feedback. Like reach out to the hiring manager, reach out to the recruiter and say, I'd really like to get some feedback so I can improve. And if you can't share negative feedback, if you can tell me what I did do really well, I would appreciate any kind of feedback that you can give me. They might be more open to giving that. It was the final round. It was a position for, tech students with no experience. I got you. So you think it might have been that you were overqualified for the job, maybe. I was randomly browsing the category, currently doing the Odin project. Oh, sweet. Odin project's great. So I'm trying to follow tech people. You fit the bill perfectly since you're a hiring manager. Yep. I mean, not currently. Well, I'm not a hiring manager, but I am on the interview team at the company where I work. I work for Postman. If you're familiar with the API tool called Postman, I'm on their developer advocacy team over there. But I've been a hiring manager. I've been a director of engineering. And so I like to help people with interview skills and how to talk about the projects that they build, how to really stand out on a resume and stuff like that. Gioba99, good to see you in chat as well. Awesome. Well, let's keep going on the Discord questions. So again, if you want to join us on Discord, you're welcome to. I'll drop that link over here again. Don't have to, but if you want to join us over there, there's lots of conversation happening in the general chatter. We've got a project channel. If you want to talk about project work, like I'm thinking about a project like this, what do you think? I'm happy to give feedback. We are going to do a resume review on September 8th. So if you want to submit a resume for me, you can send it over to this link over here. On September 15th, there's a possibility. It's not guaranteed. It's not totally locked in yet. But September 15th, I'm trying to get Finite Singularity from Twitch. His name is Mark. I'm trying to get Mark on the stream over here that we can chat about what he does as a programmer. He does a lot of freelance work, but he's been in the tech industry a very, very long time, and I love his stream. His stream is really fantastic. He's got lots of really, really cool really cool stuff going on, and the Nanoleaf didn't change. What happened to the Nanoleaf? That code crash? Nope. Didn't crash, but it didn't change. I will go change it to the Batman for you. Not sure why that didn't work. I will debug that later. So yeah, so September 15th, I'm going to try and have Mark on the stream. If you know, you'll know him as Finite Singularity. There's the Batman. There we go. So we'll get that on there for you. Found a bug in the code. No, like it didn't crash, or I think it just didn't do what it was supposed to do. Don't know why. So yeah, so you can go check that out on the website. So you can go over to Tech Interview Guide. All the content over there's free. I've got a schedule of like who's coming on the stream and when. And I think that I've got the schedule on there where I show like Mark's maybe going to be here on the 15th. Let me double check. But I've also got an email system, but it's broken right now, so I do need to go fix that one later. And have people sign up for an email newsletter that I've got, or it's a series of newsletters that you can go subscribe to, but that's currently broken, so I need to go figure out what's going on with that. Let me try it one more time. I wonder if it was like a rate limit thing, why it broke. I'm really curious, like, what happened with that. Let me copy that. Let me try this real quick. It appears to be a problem with DigitalOcean. So I have a bunch of serverless functions that handle the subscription process, and that appears to be offline somehow and not responding. So I don't know if it's a problem with my account on DigitalOcean. Go log in real quick and see if it can tell me anything. DigitalOcean. Ocean.com. Because yeah, it just times out and says there's an error. Let me log in real quick and we'll take a peek. An account with this email address wasn't found. What? What the heck? Did DigitalOcean shut me off? I didn't get any kind of notification from them, but they're not letting me log in. Oh, there we go. All right, phew. So that logged me in. So let's go over to functions. Lots of activations going on. Let's go look at the logs. I don't want to expose anything on the stream. That's why I'm not sharing that screen at the moment. Just want to go see if they can tell me what's going on. The action did not initialize or run as expected. Yeah, obviously, I already knew that. Sherlock, tell me why it didn't work. It took more than 30 seconds to run, but won't tell me why. All it says is, like, looking at log data might help. I'm looking at the log data, and it's not helping either. Some of it works fine though. Like if I reload this page, does that work? So it works retrieving, it just doesn't work for subscribing. So is it a problem with DigitalOcean talking to Airtable? All right, so I've narrowed it down a little bit. DigitalOcean is responding, but it's not responding fast enough, which means it could be a problem with DigitalOcean talking to Airtable where all the subscriptions are actually stored. So X90, good to see you. How's it going? It's been a minute. I'll give you some blinky lights and a hello. X90 is one of my VIPs, so you can go give them a follow if you like. Always very helpful individual. Good to have you in chat as well. Alrighty, well let's get back to some other questions. So again, if you've got other questions about tech-related things, I like to help with interview preparation, all that kind of stuff. If you got questions about career advancement, how to study, how to prepare, things like that, absolutely, you can drop those questions in chat, kind of as we go. Otherwise, I'm going to go start a new clip, and these clip markers that you see over in chat are just for some code that I run later afterwards, and it kind of goes through and it like clips out all the portions of video and audio and things like that for later on. Big product launch over the weekend. Awesome. Surprised they did a launch over a weekend and not like on a Monday morning or something like that, but there are reasons, I guess, why you'd want to launch on the weekend when you can kind of watch what's happening and know that it's all stable before like a Monday morning rush or something like that. It's never fun to have to do deployments and stuff like that on a weekend. So glad to hear that you're getting some rest, and congrats on the release. All right, so I'm going to jump in on a new clip here, and I'll paste a question in chat here as well. This next question I actually got from Quora. I was asked to answer this question on Quora, but I put it in the Discord channel here. It said, basically, I reworded the question a little bit. It was basically saying, are there jobs at FAANG-level companies that are easier to get as far as the interview process than other roles? FAANG companies are known to be very stringent because they're going to get the best of the best of the best, which is a lot of why their interview process is really heavy around data structures and algorithms. Are there positions at those companies that are easier to get than others? Easy is a bit of a subjective term, so I don't want to try to deflect and say like, oh, there's no way to answer that question. If you're asking specifically, in this person's case, were they asking specifically about, I'm trying to be a software developer, are there some interviews that are going to be a little bit easier where I can still be a software developer? I would say it's probably going to depend a little bit on what kind of role you want as a software developer. Like, for example, I work in developer relations, and in my typical interviews, there's not a lot of coding that happens. There might be a little bit of code that happens. Strager rating with a party of 78. What the heck? What's up, Strager? Good to see you in chat. Thanks for dropping by. In the middle of answering a question around, are there certain FAANG-level positions that are easier to get than others? Appreciate all the new follows, all the new friends. Thanks for dropping by. You'll see lots of blinky lights happening in the background here as you all follow. You never saw me live. Well, that's not my fault. Good to have you drop by. Appreciate it. We were going to try and have Strager on the stream at some point as well. So we got to figure out a new schedule for that to happen. The last time I was going to have Strager on the stream, I wasn't feeling well and I wasn't sure I was going to stream. But yeah, appreciate all the follows. Appreciate the raid. Thanks for trusting my community with yours. Yeah, so basically what I'm doing tonight is I'm going through the Discord community that we've got. You're welcome to join us over there if you like. It's just a community of people helping each other figure out interviewing for roles in the tech industry. I've been in the tech industry a long time. I got all these life highlights going on in the beard and in my hair. I've been doing this professionally for 26 years, and I've been a hiring manager and a director of engineering. So I like to help people with my thoughts and perspectives on what does it take to get through these tech interviews and so on. In this case, we had someone ask a question on Discord around, just to re-ask the question, are there specific kinds of roles at FAANG-level companies that are easier to get through the software interview process than others? And I guess depending on the kind of role. So what I was explaining is my role as a developer advocate at Postman, for example, there's not a lot of coding involved, but I'm still expected to code. But more of my interview process is going to be about how do you take care of the community? How do you build content and things like that? But developer relations roles at FAANG companies like Google and Facebook, you have to be as good as a software developer as somebody who's writing software full time for the company. And so even developer relations people are going to have to do the same kind of technical interviews for coding as somebody who's doing full time software. So my answer to this question specifically is no. There's probably not any kind of role that you can go apply to at these FAANG companies where the software development part of the interview process is easier to get through than others. The overall interview process and the overall role that you're going to end up doing, there may be roles where it may feel easier, but again, easy is a bit of a subjective term. But when these big companies are scrutinizing technical ability and the ability to write code, they need to evaluate everybody fairly. And so they're probably going to have the same kinds of people doing the software portion of the interview, no matter what kind of end role you're going into. So if you're working on, AWS and DynamoDB, and you're going to be part of the DynamoDB group, you're probably going to have to go through just as stringent a software technical challenge as somebody who's going to be teaching AWS or something like that, where they're actually teaching about coding on top of AWS. They want to make sure that everybody's got that same level of skill. So at first glance, I would say, no, there's probably not an easier interview process to go through if you still want to be doing software development. If you want to get into something like product management or something like that, it would probably lean more on the management side. But again, there's still going to be some amount of demonstration about the kind of role that you actually want to get into. You're going to have to demonstrate that skill. If your expectation at that company is to write software, you're going to have to demonstrate that skill. And those software interviews are going to be done by the same team of people that do all of the software interviews, and they're going to give you the same kinds of questions. So I don't think offhand that it would be like easier per se. Thanks for all the follows. Appreciate all this. This is pretty overwhelming. Good to have all these first time chatters and so on in here. Let me scroll back through chat. Let me see what I missed. Lots of oh hi's. Thanks for dropping by and dropping all the stuff in here. What are your thoughts on project managers? I've worked with some excellent project managers. Depends on what they do as a project manager. Some have been more stringent than others. Some have been more pushy than others. I worked with one project manager, for example, who would actually sit down and like design out the UI that they wanted my team to actually go implement. And they would come to us with like what was the tool? It wasn't like a Figma kind of, well, I guess it was kind of like a Figma kind of, block diagram kind of thing of like, here, go implement this user interface. And I looked at it, I'm like, this interface is crap. I'm not building this. And they're like, no, like, this is what I want you to go build. I'm like, I'm not building this. This is way too complex of a UI. Like, I'm not going to have my team build this. And the person actually said to me, to my face, everybody that I've talked to, every customer that I've called and explained it to, they get it. I'm like, we have tens of thousands of customers. Are you going to call all of them? Are you going to be the one on the support line answering questions about like how to use that interface? Like, are you really going to put it on the content team to have to go build whole explanation videos on how to get around this interface? Like, this interface is too complex. I'm not building it. So that was like the worst project manager I've ever worked with. I've worked with others where they're absolutely flexible, almost to a fault, where they're like, yeah, I don't care how you build it. This is, really high level what I want you to go build, go figure it out. And then we go build something. He's like, well, not like that. It's like, well, then you need to get a lot more specific about what you want us to build. So I've been on both ends of that spectrum. Overall, though, I've had pretty good experience with project managers in my career, but it does depend on what kind of project manager they are, whether they are technical or not. In the first case, the project manager that came and brought me the UI, they used to be a web developer. So they knew that technically this was possible to build. I've worked with other project managers that have an idea, even the more specific idea, where they're like, I want you to go build this thing. And we're like, that technology doesn't exist. Like, we're literally going to go have to invent things. Maybe we'll file for some patents along the way, but like, this doesn't exist yet. This is going to take a really long time to build, where they just don't have the awareness of the building blocks and the tools that we would use as developers to go build the thing. So I've been on both ends of that and everywhere in between at the same time. Let's see what else I missed in chat. What do you think about the idea of creating personal projects to find a tech job? This is exactly the kind of question that I like. And so I've answered this on the stream earlier today. The kinds of projects that are going to really stand out on a resume. Here we go. 3 projects. The first one that I want to see on a resume is something that is highly relevant to my company, ideally. So if I do environmental type of work as a company, if I'm like a very green sort of company, I want to see that as the first project. I want to see a project that shows me that you care a lot about what we do as a company. The second project should show me a lot of the fundamentals and building blocks of what you're going to do on the job. So if you're a web developer, that project should show me things like authentication, authorization, session management, database storage, maybe CRUD, like create, read, update, delete, to interact with a database, something around those fundamentals. Now, it doesn't have to be expert level, and you don't have to come up with a laundry list of like, you need to do these 100 things or you can't be a dev, because I always tell people those lists are trash. Don't ever pay attention to those lists. Go build what you want to build. But we do need to be able to demonstrate fundamental knowledge of, I know how the internet works. I know how building a website and a web app works. Let me go build that as kind of the foundational level knowledge to go build that. The third project on there should be something that you're either really, really proud of, or like a passion project of like, I'm really into RC cars, and so I built this application to track the inventory of all my RC cars and all the parts and all that kind of stuff. I'm glad I slowed down the blink on these lights back here, because normally the blink would have been like really, really vivid, and I got so many new friends and followers tonight. This thing would just be going haywire and you'd break all my nano leafs. But I appreciate all the follows very much. So those would be the 3 kinds of projects that I really like to see on a resume as a hiring manager. I want to see something that's really relevant to the role that you're applying to, whether that's the tech stack, but ideally what we do as a company. So if my company has some kind of API or technology you can build into a project, build that into a project and make that the first project I see on a resume. And then I'll show you an example of like a resume thing that we can look at here in a minute. And then another project is I want to see strong fundamentals and foundational of what we do just within this kind of role. So if you're doing web development, I want to see a project about web development. If you're more low-level programmer, show me something around like multi-threaded, multi-processing, parallelism, those kinds of things, shared memory, maybe file system access, stuff around that line where you're applying for a low-level job. Show me a project where you know a lot of those kinds of fundamentals about what it means to be a low-level programmer. If you want to get into firmware, show me that you have a good understanding of firmware fundamentals and memory usage and things like that, and memory reuse and, doing your own garbage collection and stuff like that. Those would be the kinds of projects I would want to see that are relevant to the role. And then show me something that you're really proud of. Show me something that you're like really into, like, for example, I wrote the Twitch bot over here. That's something that I'm really proud of. I'm adding to it all the time. That might be something that I would promote and say, hey, maybe you don't care about Python. Maybe you don't care about IRC and like doing all this stuff. Another raid, what the heck, from CM Griffin. I got both you guys raiding me tonight. It's fantastic. Hey, Chris, good to see you in chat. Thanks for raiding over as well. We just had Strager raid in a minute ago. So get ready to get, all these lights blinking again. So appreciate all these communities dropping by. So thanks for coming in. So yeah, those would be the 3 projects that I would really want to see on a resume. So let me show you what I like to see in a resume. So I've got this whole website, by the way, Tech Interview Guide. It's all free content. You can go check it out. The email series on here is broken at the moment. There's some disconnect between DigitalOcean and Airtable. So don't try and sign up yet. But let me go over to this. This is a resume sample that I've got, and I'll drop this link in chat, resume sample. And everybody can go grab this if you like. You're welcome to open this and leave comments and so on. But this is some bits of how I like to build a resume and how I coach people about building a resume. It's not for everybody, but I kind of talk a little bit about like, here's how to build out skills and so on in a particular way. When we talk about projects, though, I like to see the name of the project. I like to see, is it a solo project? Is it a team project? Give me a link where I can go view that thing online, ideally. Show me that you know how to deploy code. That always looks great. Give me the repo as well. And then give me a user empathy statement. What does the user even do? I've seen a lot of these apps where you go click and the first thing you see is a login page, and that's all you see. You don't see anything about what the app is, who it's for, what you even do. You're just told to register and log in. That's not helpful for me. I want to see a landing page that tells me like, this is what the app actually is. Entice me to actually sign up. But if you can give me some sort of user empathy statement on here, that'd be great. And then show me, tell me something fun, tell me something that you learned about the project, or tell me, something that was really important to you about that project, why you built it, why you learned it, and then show me that tech stack. Now, if my company has some kind of technology, you're going to list that project up first, because you're going to say, hey, I really like SendGrid. I used to work at SendGrid, for example. So I'm a big fan of SendGrid, and so I built SendGrid into this project. So the bullet point would be something like implemented SendGrid to send email 300 times faster than, my local host SMTP kind of thing, for blasting out series of emails or something like that. That's where you really want to hook into them. So from a hiring manager's perspective, I want to see in a hurry on your resume, how are you relevant for the job that you've applied to? I want to see the skills. So in this case, if I'm hiring for Ruby and JavaScript, you'll probably throw some bold tags on there, make that pop out. Use bold like hot sauce, though. You don't just dump hot sauce on everything unless you're that type of person, in which case you probably just need a spicier hot sauce. But don't just like pour hot sauce on everything. It loses its impact. You want it to just be a little sprinkle here and there. So same thing with throwing bold on terminologies and keywords on here that you really want to stand out in the resume. But highlight the skills that you want me to see. You're going to draw my attention on the page with that sort of stuff. And then if you are coming out of a boot camp or coming out of university, give me your education next. So from top to bottom, I'm seeing this is what I know. This is where I've practiced it. This is where I've learned it. And then this is all of my other experience, especially if it's non-technical experience. If it is technical experience, you're going to put your technical experience ahead of your projects. So you'll have your tech experience here. This is what I like to see in a resume. Not everybody's going to agree. These are just my own opinions and perspectives. Being a hiring manager, this is how I would like to see stuff like this. So if you're currently working in tech and you're currently a programmer or doing something in the tech industry, show me your skills and then show me your technical experience and then show me project work after that. But eventually your technical experience is going to outweigh non-technical experience. That stuff will gradually go away. You're welcome to grab this format. You're welcome to use it or not. Totally up to you. Email's fake up here. Don't try and email me there. It's not going to go anywhere. But that is my real LinkedIn account. So if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, you're absolutely welcome to. Happy to connect with folks all the time. And if you want to use my network to get introductions, we can do bang introductions. And here's a little gist that I wrote. You can go see it in chat up here on how to use my network to figure out, does Ian know anybody at this company? I will make introductions for folks that come through my stream and say, hey, Chris came through my stream, wanted to get an introduction to somebody at Microsoft. You're at Microsoft. If you got a minute, here's Chris's profile. Can you have a chat? I'm more than happy to use my network to help all of you find networks and build out your own network and make those introductions. So feel free to make use of that. So those are some ideas about how I would want to lay out those projects on the page. Tell me whether it's a solo project or a group project. If it was a group project, tell me your role in the group. Don't just say this is a group project and we all did a little bit of everything. If that's the case, that's fine. But if you worked specifically on, accessing a Google API of some kind, tell me that in the project. So when I go look at the project, I know which part to go look at because I know that's the part that you specifically built. I'm not going to spend time digging through contributor graphs and things like that on GitHub. So again, you need to show me in a hurry, how are you relevant to this job? What you want to do on a resume, whether it's talking about your projects or talking about your work, you want to show me the impact that you have where I can say, oh, if I hire Ian, Ian's going to come do that here. So you want to have good impact statements, not just I did a thing, but I did a thing and it made this better. You want to kind of tease that FOMO on me of I'm going to miss out on this person. They could come do that here, which is also why you don't want to put negative things on a resume. Oh, I really struggled to implement GraphQL in this project. Well, don't tell me that, because if I'm looking to implement GraphQL, I'm not going to hire somebody that struggles with implementing GraphQL. Tell me how easy it was to implement GraphQL. I'm more likely to give you a phone call to get into that interview. Those are the kinds of things to me that would stand out on a resume. Show me what you built, show me the impact of that, but it needs to be the most relevant information about me and my company and the skills that you have to show me that you're headed in the same direction as me. That's what's going to make me want to interview you. So hopefully that was helpful there. Cool. Landing page is a good idea. Yeah, I've seen so many projects, especially from students in boot camps, where they're like, we go here and we log in, and then you get to see everything that it unlocks. It's like, but I've got to register and log in first. Like, I'm not just going to give you a username and password if you don't even tell me what this app is. Like, it was literally something like, it was like pet. It was something about pets. I don't even know. It was like pet something at herokuapp.com. And I click on the thing. I'm like, it was literally just a blank background with a little dialogue drawn on the page of like, give me a username and an email. It wasn't even like username password or email password. It was like username, email, and like click to register. It's like, what is this even for? Like, I don't even know what I'm looking at here. Like, I see a landing page. It's like, all right, they know how to build a landing page, and I guess they know how to do form input, but like authentication where you're asking me for a username and an email, but not a password. It didn't do OAuth. It's like not even going to bother registering to look any further than that. So I like seeing links on a resume that I can click and actually go experience what you've built, but it has to be a good experience, right? I mean, again, you're teasing me like if I come work for you, I can do that for you too. That's what you want to show me. So make it a good experience. Those would be the kinds of things I look for. So appreciate you asking. What else did I get in here? Asked about projects for text job, trying to make it my full-time gig. Awesome. First time chat from M1 FMD. I don't know how you pronounce that. My question is a bit vague on purpose. What do you think as an individual contributor of following projects versus following a good manager in a career? Projects are interesting, but tech stacks change. I always get a little bit worried when I ask somebody like, hey, why are you interested in this role? It's like, oh, you're also using Python and Flask, and I really like that technology. In my mind, I could be thinking, well, shoot, like a month from now, we're moving off of Flask, so I'm not going to bother interviewing you any further. Or, we're already planning to like migrate off of that onto some other platform, where we're not even going to use that technology anymore. So am I going to lose you as an employee, or do you care about what we do as a company to continue building on what we do aside from the tech stack? Now, you're asking specifically about, staying on a particular type of project. So if it's something like, I don't know, computer vision and AR, like augmented reality or something like that, and the company's like all about that. If you're bought in on the idea of what we're building, it doesn't matter what the tech stack is, because you're all in on what it is we're building and not how we're building it. There's a quote that I butcher all the time because I don't know the exact quote, and it's been kind of like in flux over the years, but it's like, if you want to go sail the ocean, you don't teach people how to chop down trees and teach them how to build a boat. You also teach them to love the ocean. They'll figure out how to build the boat. And it's the same kind of a thing in tech, where if you care about what we do, you're going to go figure out a how. I don't necessarily have to worry about finding the best boat builder. You're going to figure out how to go build a boat if you care about the ocean as much as I do. And so when it comes to management style, though, I mean, managers make a big difference. The saying of you don't quit the job, you quit your manager, absolutely true. I've done it several times. Even at the director level, I quit a job because of the leadership of the company. So both times, actually, that I had a director level role, I left the company because of the leadership of the company. Don't go look at that up on my LinkedIn. But I mean, now that I said that, you're going to go look it up on my LinkedIn, but whatever. But you really do quit your manager. So having a good manager makes a big difference. Now, I've left jobs where I've kept in touch with the manager and say like, hey, what are you up to? I'm just calling to check in, whether it's at a mentorship level or just to stay in contact at a personal level. I've stayed in contact with several managers that I've gotten along with really well. So it varies. It really does vary. But following a project versus following a manager, if you're talking like going from job to job, that project isn't necessarily going from company to company. The manager might go from one company to another and bring several of their team on board. I've seen that happen a ton of times. We'll hire a manager, and the next thing we know, that manager is hiring all their old team because they know them and they all work well together. So it's a much easier interview process for them of like, hey, you want to come work over here? The rest of us are over here. It's like, sure, yeah, let's do it. I've had a couple of jobs now where I've worked with several former colleagues because we all like working well together. And we, not just that we like each other, but we work well together. We understand each other's strengths and weaknesses and idiosyncrasies and personalities and whatever. So it varies. It really depends on what you're doing in your career. Yep. Let me dive in a little bit. Looks like I missed some stuff going on in chat here. Let me just scroll down. Am I a one-page resume supremacist? Nope, my own resume is 2 pages. I think at a certain point, you're allowed to have a second page. I would say typically, so let's go chat about that real quick. So on a resume, again, I want to see the most relevant stuff first. So there's an old newspaper term called above the fold, that basically when they take a newspaper and they fold it in half and put it in the newspaper stand, the most relevant stuff is on the top half of that page. So my hope, if I zoom out on this page for a sec, my hope is that the first half of this page contains the most relevant stuff I need to know about you. The second half of the page is not as important, and the second page onward is like even less important. Because like if I print 2 pages and I only walk away with page 1 from the printer because I'm only expecting a 1-page resume, then I've got everything that I need to know that's most relevant about you on that job. But again, you need to catch my attention in the first half of that page, because as I'm skimming through this, I need to see in a hurry, are you relevant to this job? What skills do you have that are relevant to that job? If I don't see that, I'm going to pass on your resume. When I'm looking at resumes, I'm looking for a reason to say no. When I'm interviewing you, I'm looking for a reason to say yes. Interviewing sucks. We hate interviewing too. We want that interview process to be over. It's expensive. But when I'm screening resumes, I'm looking for a reason to say, no, I don't want to call this person. So if you've got wall-to-wall text, top-to-bottom text, I've seen tons of those in my career. If this thing is just margin-to-margin giant block of text, I'm going to pass on your resume. I'm not going to spend the time to read it, because it's going to be a lot harder to find those keywords to figure out whether you're relevant for my job. At the same time, if it's really sparse and you've barely got any content on there, yeah, it's going to be really fast to read. But unless you're really catching my attention with how you're relevant for the position that you've applied to, I'm also going to pass on your resume. So there's a happy medium in there somewhere. But I need to figure out in a hurry as I'm scanning through, like, what do you know? How have you practiced it? Where did you learn it? Kind of thing. So if you're fresh out of school, I'd like to see things in this order. Not everybody will. This is just my take on it. Opinions are like armpits. Everybody's got a couple. Some of them stink. You don't have to listen to my opinion here, but I appreciate you coming by. But I like to see skills and then projects and then education. Some people like putting education at the very top because they're at a very prestigious school like MIT or Georgia Tech or Stanford or something like that. In that case, yeah, there are companies out there who will literally interview you and practically throw a job offer at you in that first interview because you go to Stanford for a computer science degree. That's the reality of it. There are companies out there like, oh, Stanford CS degree. All right, here's your job offer. Because they trust the curriculum. They trust that if you've gotten through that program that you know what you're doing. Because they're harder programs, they're more prestigious and so on. Me, I don't give a rip really where you went to school. I want to know, what do you claim to know? How have you practiced it? Because I'm going to make you demonstrate it in the interview process anyway. So really, it doesn't matter to me where you went to school, but for some companies it will. So that's why I like to see things in that order. Once you have technical experience, that's going to happen on the resume before your projects. You'll list out those jobs here. And then if you have non-technical experience that's also relevant to me and my company, you'll put that later. So what I tell people often is, I learned a riddle when I was a kid that said, how do you make a sculpture of an elephant? You start with a giant block of stone, you chip away everything that doesn't look like an elephant. So how do you look like a good candidate for a job? You put everything on one gigantic resume. Every project, every job you've ever had, lots of bullet points on all the things. Put everything on here. Every programming language you've ever used, every library, every technology you've ever used, it's going to be way more than a page. It'll be way more than 2 pages for some of you. I've been doing this for 26 years. I could probably pull out like a 4-page resume with absolutely everything I've ever done. I'm not going to submit a monstrosity like that to any job. But what I'm going to do is when I go apply for a job, I'm going to make a copy of it. I'm going to trim away everything that's not relevant to that company in that role. I'm going to bring it back down to 1 page, maybe 2 pages. So how do you look like the best candidate for a job? You start with a big resume and chip away everything that doesn't look like the best candidate for the job. If I'm looking for a Python developer, I'm not going to leave it here in the middle of the list. As a human, when I'm scanning down things like this and I'm reading bullet points, I'm only picking up the first 5 or 6 words of that bullet point if I'm skimming it. If I'm literally taking the time to read every word on there, it's a little bit different. But if I'm skimming the resume, I'm only picking up the first 5 or 6 words anyway. So if I'm looking for somebody that knows React, I don't want to see it down here at the end of the list. If I'm looking for a React developer, if that's part of the job, don't even throw a bold tag on there. Put that thing at the beginning of the list so you look like a React developer who happens to know Ruby and Python. You want to look like a React developer. So you're going to reorganize your skills block. You're going to reorganize your projects to what's most relevant to me and my company, because that's going to make you stand out. I need to see that relevance in a hurry. I'm going to look at that and go, yeah, okay, that's a maybe. And then I'm going to go back over and go, oh yeah, this is exactly what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a React developer. We also have some Python on the back end. So yeah, this looks like a good fit. I'm going to get them on the call. All right, I see some stuff happening in chat here. So let me go look at that. Someone said good questions. Let me go see what happened in that thread. How do you respond if they ask, what's your current salary? I don't answer that. I always answer that question with, what are you offering for the job? Your current salary doesn't matter to them, and you should not share it. So I always answer that question with a question. I did my own job hunt recently, by the way, December and January, I changed my job. And I interviewed with 30 companies. Only one of them would not tell me the salary range when I asked, but I never had to give a salary range. If the company doesn't say, this is who we are, this is what the role is, this is what our salary range is, do you have any questions? My first 2 questions to every recruiter that I talk to, what's the interview process like? Walk me through the entire interview process. How many steps, how many stages, how many hours can I expect to do for this technical interview process? And the second question is, what is the salary range you're offering for the role? I only had one company not tell me the salary. And they're like, well, we want to get through the interview process. We'll talk about that later. And already in the back of my mind, I'm like, they're going to lowball me. They were actually the first job offer that I got. They didn't ask me to demonstrate very much about my technical skill. It was a developer relations role, but it was for an IoT company. And I submitted some code. I'm like, this is some IoT stuff that I've done, and I do these things with the lights. And they're like, oh, this is awesome. Here's your job offer. And they lowballed me. It was like really, really low. Like almost insultingly low. And I'm like, okay, thanks for the offer. I need some time to think about this. And then I started getting other offers. And I went back to them. I'm like, okay, your offer is like way lower than everybody else. Like, this is the minimum of the rest of the offers. Like, can you come up to that range? And they're like, we can't quite get there. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to take your job. Thank you. And it's an unfortunate reality of it. But if you're not going to tell me that salary up front, I'm not going to bother now with those interviews. So always ask them what salary range they're offering. Now, if it's part of the application process where you have to pick a salary range of like, how much do you want to make, figure out whatever salary you're making now, add 10, 20% and put that in. It won't necessarily disqualify you. They just want to know, like, are we in the ballpark? I'm at an advantage living in Colorado, where we passed a law that companies that want to try to recruit people in Colorado have to share the salary range if they're posting the job to recruit in Colorado. And if a company didn't, again, that's the first thing I ask. And I point out to them, it's like, hey, I live in Colorado. You have to tell me what the salary range is. They're like, oh, it's this much. I'm like, all right, cool. Let's keep talking. If it was within the range, or I would just tell them right on that very first phone call, hey, I'm expecting this kind of range. Is that a possibility, or should we just stop talking? Not in those words, but that's kind of the impression that I would give. And it was amazing how many times the recruiters are like, yeah, okay, let me see what I can do. Let's get you in the interview mix and whatever. And sometimes they would call back and say, no, we really can't get that close, but we could make it up on equity or make it up on other perks or do a cash signing bonus or whatever to kind of get you there. I would still typically withdraw, because salary is worth more than a cash bonus. Your salary is what determines your raises, sometimes your bonuses, and so on. So always negotiate more salary. If they really can't move on salary and they offer a cash bonus, that's fine. Ideally, they give you a cash bonus plus your salary, but that's not always a possibility depending on the company. So knowing all these kinds of things make a big, big difference. Sorry if I'm missing other questions. There's a lot going on in chat. I got a dev job with only a high school degree. That's great. You don't have to have a university degree or a college diploma, anything like that. You can be entirely self-taught, because our whole interview process is how can you demonstrate the skill that you have? That's like ours is one of the only industries where you have to demonstrate that skill. You never hear of a doctor trying to get a job where they say, hey, go operate on that patient. And if they live, you get the job. It's like, they look at your experience, they look at your credentials and so on. And it's like, and you have to renew that from time to time. That's fine. But there's definitely a level of, demonstration in our industry. It's just the unfortunate part. One sec. Have I read Patrick McKenzie's article on negotiating for engineers? No, but if you link it, I would love to. I always love learning other people's perspectives on that stuff. So feel free to drop it in chat if you have it. Thanks again for all the follows and for the raids. I appreciate it. Let me see what else I missed in here. I like that response. Appreciate it. I like having you in chat. So yeah, so if they ask what your current salary is, you don't have to tell them. So my response is always just ask them what salary range they're offering. Now, what's your expectation? Again, you can share that if you want to, but I would also answer that with, what's the range? And then from there, I wouldn't even give them a range. From there, I would just say, yeah, okay, let's go through the interview process. And so that's not committing to, yes, I will accept that as a range. It's just letting them know that I'm okay with that range, but we may have a conversation about it later on if you make me an offer. So you're not saying like, oh yeah, that's exactly the range I was thinking of too. Don't say anything like that. Just ask them, what range are you offering? And then from there, like, what kind of compensation package is there? I understand I still have to go through the interview process, but like, what are we talking as far as total comp? You can have that conversation as the very first phone call. You don't have to wait for the negotiations at the end to find out that information. I always do it on the first phone call because I want to know if they're going to waste my time. It's like, I expect this kind of range, and if you're not even close to that range, why are we talking? Not that I'm being arrogant about it, but if I've got a lifestyle and an expectation, my skills are worth money. If you're not willing to pay for what my skills are worth, why go through, however many hours? You just told me this interview process was going to be like 8 steps and 12 hours worth of, interviews or whatever. It's like, I'm going to go through all that and you're not going to pay me market rate, or you're going to pay the low end of market rate for someone with my skill and the kind of stuff that I do. Like, why am I going to bother with that? I would rather withdraw now and save us all the hassle instead of get to the interview or the negotiation stage where they make an offer and I'd be like, yeah, I actually expect a salary that's like double what you're offering. They're not necessarily going to be able to make those kinds of moves. So now we're all disappointed, right? So find that out up front. Just ask. The worst they'll do is not tell you. But if they really push you on, this is our range, what are you expecting? Like, we need to have a number that you can, little industry secret, they don't have to have a number, but they want to know that you're also interested in that role and that you're not going to ask for something astronomically larger. If you get them to say a number first, I would typically start at the high end of what they offer, add 10% and say, so if they say like, oh, we were going to offer like 150 to 175, I would go, okay, 175 plus 10% is like 190. I would say, okay, cool. Well, I'm expecting somewhere in like the 190 to 220 kind of range. Is that a possibility? Now they know how much they need to move their window. And if you can also kind of tease that FOMO a little bit and say, well, I'm actively interviewing and I'm expecting an offer in this range, is that something that you can match? Then it also gives them an idea of like what they need to do to compete. In the Denver area, when I was a software teacher, I would actually help students through the negotiation process where one particular company lowballed a student. And I said, well, you need to write them back and say, hey, market rate for this kind of role is X, within this range, X and Y. And they wrote back and they're like, oh, okay. And they met in that range because they were just ignorant. They didn't know that that was the range. It's like, okay, that's okay. Like, you have to forgive that to some degree. You can't expect everybody's just trying to lowball you for no reason. But my responsibility as a hiring manager is to pay you as little as possible to come do the job that I need you to do, because I have a responsibility to the business. But if you can make a good case for why you deserve that amount of money and just say like, I want this amount of money or we're not talking, that comes across as arrogant. and they're going to just say, okay, well, let's not bother then. But if you say, hey, based on my experience, based on the skills that I bring, the value that I'm going to demonstrate through the interview process, I'd really like to be making this range. Is that a possibility? And I'm expecting an offer, around this range, that range. Is that something that, the company can match as far as compensation package? Let me know. And then we can actually talk about, scheduling the interviews. So you can actually negotiate as the very first step. You don't have to wait to the end. Something that not a lot of people talk about, but absolutely possible. It's a bit big. Yeah, cool. Thanks for sharing that. I'm going to open that up and have a look at that a little bit later. Sarah says in chat, oh, some companies don't give out their salary range. Yeah, then walk away. So I agree with Strager. You can withdraw as a candidate. If they absolutely refuse to tell you, then you should say, okay, well, I want to make sure that I'm not wasting my time. So if you can't share that salary range, then I'm going to withdraw as a candidate and withdraw. If it's a company that you really want to work at, though, they might play on your emotion a little bit and go, well, if you really want to work here, it doesn't matter how much we pay you because you're going to like the work. It's like, but I have bills to pay. So you need to let me know what that expectation is because I don't want to get through the interview process and be disappointed. You can literally use that language with them. You don't have to be aggressive about it. But you can say, hey, look, I want to make sure that we're all on the same page here. So if they're really pushing you for your expectation, you can use somebody else's salary range and say, well, I'm currently interviewing with this other company. They're offering within this range. Is that something that you can at least match? It'll let them know, especially if it's a competing company. Like if you're targeting e-commerce, for example, and you're interviewing at Stripe, and then you go get an interview at, say, PayPal or something like that and say, well, let's say PayPal is the one that won't tell you their salary range. You can say, well, I'm currently interviewing at Stripe and they're offering this range. Is that something you can compete with? Otherwise, I need to do what's best for my family and my career. It lets them know like, oh, shoot, they're paying like way more than we are. Or, oh, yeah, we can do better than that. Like we'll pay you X dollars. So you can actually negotiate all of that before you ever get started. RC Maniac said, Twitch lied to me, said you weren't on. I'm always on Thursday nights. You know that? Passion doesn't pay my mortgage, exactly. It's that whole exposure thing. Well, you work for exposure. Exposure doesn't pay the bills. Are there companies that we absolutely avoid? I absolutely avoid any company where I have to wear a tie. I will wear a tie and dress up if my wife asks me to. But I will not wear a tie on the job. I made myself that promise all the way back in college in the mid-90s. I will not ever work a job where I have to like wear a jacket and a tie just to go to work. I need to be comfortable. I'll wear a button-down shirt. I'll button it up close to the top if you really need me to. But aside from that, I'm a t-shirt, hoodie, ball cap wearing kind of guy. That's who I am. That's who you're hiring. It doesn't matter what I wear to get the job done. If it's something where clients are coming in and you need me to look professional, I'll dress professionally, but I'm not going to wear a tie. That's just not something I'm going to do. So I've never worked at a bank. I've never worked at an insurance company where that is an expectation. So dress for the job you want. All right, I'll dress up like Batman. Thanks for all the new follows. Appreciate all that. Yeah, so others were saying like, yeah, you can walk away. That would be the go-to move, but it's not ideal if you really need a job or badly want that job. But that's where you need to make that personal decision of like, they're really being sticklers about it. Like, should I go through the interview process anyway? In this particular case with this company that wouldn't share their salary with me, I was actually really interested in doing IoT kind of work as a developer relations, developer advocate kind of role, where I was going to get to nerd out on IoT hardware and writing firmware and playing with Raspberry Pis and Arduinos all the time. Like, that would be awesome. I got tons of that stuff over here. I love tinkering with that kind of stuff, and to do that as a job would be great. But I'm not going to do it for $130,000 a year. And even when I pointed out, it's like, hey, you're like way lower than all these other offers that I actually have coming in. And I actually listed out, I got this offer from this company, this offer from this company, this offer. I had a total of 6 offers. And I'm like, these are all the other offers. You're like way lower. And they're like, well, we can come up to 150. And I'm like, okay, but what else can you do? Can you do a cash signing bonus? Can you do more equity? They're like, no, that's the best we can do. I'm like, see ya. And it was disappointing. I'm like, oh, I would have really liked to nerd out on like building little circuits and IoT stuff all the time. It's a really cool company. I don't want to say too much about it because their interview process was actually really great. and the team over there is really great, and I stay in touch with them. But the salary was way too low. I couldn't do it. So it's not always about the money, but it's often about the money. So let's see what else we got going on in chat. So RC Maniac, good to see you in chat. RC Maniac's also one of my VIPs, so folks that come by and help out a lot in chat, I give the little VIP tag on there as well. Zomboy, good to see you in chat. What's my thought about data analysis? I'm a computer science student. Cool. Well, for starters, congrats on getting into a CS program. My thought about data analysis, it's really interesting if you let the data tell the story and not try to tell the story and make the data fit your story. There was something that I was reading about, if I remember right, it was Stacey Abrams trying to get elected in Georgia, where they were talking about letting the data tell them the story about what was going on with, their constituents and things like that. It wasn't Stacey Abrams, it was someone else. I can't remember who it was, but they were basically talking about data analysis, and they're like, it's one thing to say, like, we want to talk about this economic situation, so here's a bunch of data that fits that narrative. But this particular group was saying, no, we're actually going to look at the data, and we're going to figure out what the data is telling us about, socioeconomic status of this particular range, whatever. I normally stay away from politics, but it ties in with the question here. So I think the idea of data analysis is really great as long as you let the data tell the story and not try to make the data fit the story that you want to tell. Data analysis is actually really neat, though, depending on how you slice the data and how you look at it and all the different facets that you can kind of look at things. You get into data warehousing and data lakes, and how do you access that data quickly? How do you crunch that data quickly? Some pretty fascinating stuff. I've done little bits of that in my career. It was 2009, 2010 kind of range. I was doing a lot of data crunching and processing of data, and basically self-building a MapReduce system before MapReduce was really taking off. It was right around the time that big data systems and data warehousing was just starting to take hold in the industry. We were writing all of that ourselves at this company. So it's actually a really interesting kind of field if you like figuring out how data can tell a story and how to visualize things and how to do charts and graphs in a way that's telling a meaningful story. Like, you can look at a bar chart and a pie chart and a line chart, and they all look different. And so they all kind of tell a story a little bit different based on how you lay out that data and how you actually present that data. It can look like it's telling a different kind of story. So trying to understand, like, hey, if I've got this kind of data, I need to plot it in this kind of way to appeal to this kind of person reading that data. Some of it comes down to the user experience of how they interpret what you're analyzing of that data in order to tell that story. So it's actually a pretty fascinating field. There's a lot of work in data science and data analysis and data engineering. There's a lot of work in that field right now. So it's something that I think a lot more companies are paying attention to as they're collecting analytics data on everybody, because everybody's tracking everything about everybody. What do you do with all that data? How do you actually break that data down to use something meaningful about that data? Now, aside from the fact that companies are over collecting data than they actually need, that's a whole other issue. But data analysis is actually a pretty neat facet of what we do in the tech industry. If I may, how old are you? I'm old. Does my age get in the way of getting new jobs? It didn't for me. I applied at 30 companies. I withdrew from 5 or 6 of them because their teams were all male or all white. And I'm like, I believe very strongly in diversity, and your company appears not to. So I withdrew from 6 companies. So that left me with 24. Of those 24 companies, I had 6 job offers. I turned 48 this year. So no, it's not really a big deal. It can be a big deal, especially for people that are changing careers and getting into the tech industry as like a second or a third career. It can impact a little bit more. So really, when we talk about, like, going back to the idea of what I was saying with resumes, if you can show the impact that you had at previous jobs and how all of that makes you a better developer, it's all about how you tell that story. So it really comes down to, all these other experiences I had at all these other jobs, working on teams, working in these professional settings. This is how I learned to communicate well with customers, and that's going to make me a better developer because such and such. If you've got a good story to tell, your age doesn't matter. Now, some companies are going to be like, well, you're over 40, so you're not going to like type as fast. Well, guess what? If your company's more than 50 people and I'm over 40, I become a protected class of citizen where you can't fire me for working slower because I don't type faster than somebody else. That doesn't give me an excuse to be lazy, but you do become a protected class of citizen once you're over a certain age, if the company's over a certain size in certain parts of the country. So here in Colorado, if I'm over 40, I'm a protected class of citizen. So they can't discriminate against my age during the hiring practice. But looking over my resume, they can be like, all right, this dude's been around a minute. So they can kind of guess at your age at that point. But they could select you out of that and not call you, and you have no idea why. And you've been biased against, and you have no proof that it was because of your age. But if they make a comment on the interview, it's like, dang, you're old. It's like, well, okay, and now we're not moving forward in the interview process. It's like, okay, maybe that was an age discrimination thing, and you can raise some awareness about it. If it's a blatant like, oh yeah, you're old or you've got a family and we're looking for somebody that doesn't have like family connections so you can work a lot more. Now that's a very blatant discriminatory practice, which is against the law, and you can have your day in court over that. So yeah, ageism is a thing in tech, absolutely. A lot of companies really want that vibrant, fresh energy coming out of school, but I have that vibrant, fresh energy learning new tech all the time. So it really comes down to the story that you tell about the impact that you're going to have and how you're going to make that company better, how you're going to make their team better. Let me see what else I missed in chat here. Were they asking me to estimate the weight of the horses and ducks? What did I miss? I had an interview today with a FAANG company. The interview asked if it would be easier to fight 100 duck-sized horses or one horse-sized duck. Really? That's like one of those like silly icebreaker types of questions. That wouldn't be a legit question to ask. They were probably just making conversation at that point. Those kinds of questions wouldn't weigh in on an actual interview. That might just be more like, you seem really nervous, so let me ask you some really ridiculous question just to get the conversation going. That type of answer wouldn't actually play out as something they would hold against you. Like, oh, they said, fighting 100 duck-sized horses would be better. I mean, a duck-sized horse, those are going to be pretty easy to take down, to be honest. But you got a horse-sized duck, like that's going to have some muscle behind it. So it's not a joke. They were asking it because it's something that they were asked in an interview. They want to, yeah. I mean, RC Maniac's right in that regard. A lot of interviewers don't get training. FAANG company employees do get training, though, on how to interview. And so if they asked that question, it was probably meant to be an icebreaker. It wouldn't actually play in. Now, if you get that kind of question, or even like a LeetCode style question at like a startup kind of company, it's because that interviewer didn't get training. They didn't know how to interview you. So they're giving you an interview like how they interviewed back in the day. And because they got asked a LeetCode question, they're giving you a LeetCode question. That's unfortunately the common practice. But if you're at a FAANG company and then you have somebody interviewing you, they have gone through training to know how to interview people, what kinds of responses to add, to watch out for, how to infer tone in the things that you say, how to gauge, honesty and things like that. They go through training programs for all of that stuff. So if they ask that question, I would say it was probably an icebreaker kind of thing. Don't worry, I still type faster than Strager. Cool, just having a look through some of the chat here. Companies get away with this practice. Yeah. If you're old, then why did you quit? Aren't I diverse? Not sure what you're asking me on those kinds of things. I appreciate diversity because having different backgrounds and different perspectives on life makes better software and makes better engineering practice all around. Like back in the 70s and 80s when they were first developing airbags, they were absolutely confused why women and children were being killed by airbags. It's because the only people they were protecting were the 6-foot-tall, 200-pound men that were designing and building the airbags. If they had had some diversity on the team, they might have said like, hey, so-and-so is a little bit shorter or a little bit taller, a little bit leaner, a little bit heavier. Let's make a crash test dummy that looks like them. And, oh, hey, You know, they just went through the windshield, or hey, they got absolutely pummeled by that thing. Maybe we need to adjust some stuff. And so having diversity on the team makes for better software. So I'm a big believer in diversity, and that's something, it's the only reason I have actually banned people from my channels, people that are absolutely against the idea of diversity in tech. I'm not saying white men in tech don't belong. I'm saying we have plenty of white men in tech. I would like to see other people in tech as well. I have worked with many other people from lots of diverse backgrounds, and I deeply appreciate it as a manager, as a director, as well as an individual contributor. And that's something that I will not argue on in my channel. So please don't try to bait me into that kind of conversation. But I strongly believe in diversity. If you don't, you're welcome to go find another channel, because it is something that I do talk about and something that I do believe in here. When I started working at my current place, it was almost 50% non-white or female. Now it's 70%, 75% white men. Yeah. That's the problem with AI. AI needs diversity. Exactly. I mean, the people that write all the AI stuff, their beliefs and opinions and perspectives get built into the software. Like, I think it was Amazon. They were trying to figure out, like, how can we build an applicant tracking system that allows us to have diversity, but the only, like, what they wanted to do is they wanted to have it look through resumes and try to find people with a diverse background. But the only resumes that they wanted to screen were people that were already successful at Amazon, aside from Amazon and their hiring practices and everything anyway. But they fed it all the resumes of people who were high performers at Amazon, which tended to be white males. And so the applicant tracking system learned to screen out white male resumes, and suddenly they were the only people getting interviewed. So again, like, how you source that data and how you build out those algorithms depends on the outcome. So yeah, we absolutely need that diversity. Our student contacts. Myself and a friend interviewed at Google around the same time. I was asked to interview in New York City. My friend was interviewed in Mountain View. I got asked to solve technical problems and what I understood. They got asked how many ping pong balls could fit in a school bus. One side called those questions BS, the other is how they get hired. Yeah. So Google used to be really famous for asking those kinds of questions. They actually started around 2006, 2007. In 2009, they actually published a paper that said, hey, you know what, asking those kinds of questions, we didn't get any good information. Like, everybody kind of broke those problems down the same way of, like, how big is the school bus? Are the windows up or down? Are the seats inside the school bus? Let's look at the dimensions, the dimension of a ping pong ball, and you can do some rough math. Nobody was coming up with anything new or clever about it. And so Google stopped asking those questions. And then other companies followed suit. They generally don't ask those kinds of brain teaser questions, except as an icebreaker when we see that somebody's really nervous. What was interesting for me was about this time last year, Amazon announced that they weren't going to ask dynamic programming problems anymore. And then Facebook followed suit later in the fall and said, we're also not going to ask dynamic programming problems anymore. Because again, people were kind of breaking those problems down the same way. Everybody was kind of doing bottom-up recursion with caching. There was nothing new or novel about how to solve that problem. And so they're like, we're not getting good signals out of this, so why are we asking these questions? And so they stopped asking those kinds of problems. They're still asking traversal algorithms and things like that, like backtracking and depth first search, breadth first search, and so on. But they're specifically staying away from what are traditionally dynamic programming problems. And this has been confirmed by them. It's not a secret or anything like that. But it'll be interesting to see now whether other companies follow suit and say, yeah, we're not going to ask those kinds of questions either. I think it's a matter of time, because everybody kind of watches how everybody else interviews, and they all try to do the interviews the same way. And so as something changes in the industry, it kind of trickles down into everybody else. So when Google started and they were asking those brain teaser questions, so did everybody else. All the other FAANG companies were asking them, and then Google published this thing saying, we're not going to ask those anymore, and suddenly everybody else stopped. It still happens from time to time, but it's not as common. I suggest a book called Weapons of Mass Destruction. I've seen that book. I haven't read it, but it looks good. Ivan SNZ. Sorry if this has already been asked. Approximately how many projects do you recommend having in my personal portfolio to get my first interview? Greetings from ARG. Argentina. Cool. How many projects do I recommend having in a portfolio? I mean, the size of the portfolio doesn't matter as much as the quality of what you have in that portfolio. So I answered this earlier on the stream where if we look at, hey, thanks for the cheers. Having a project where you can show the fundamentals of what it is you're going to be doing on the job. So someone was just mentioning like machine learning a minute ago and AI. So if you really want to get into AI and machine learning and that sort of thing, then build out a project that shows me that you understand the fundamentals of what machine learning and AI does. We talked a little bit earlier, like if you want to do low-level programming, show me a project that does recursion and multiprocess and inter-process communication and threading and locking and all that kind of stuff. If you're doing web applications, show me something that can do CRUD applications, form processing, session management, authentication, and so on. If you're getting a job that deals with APIs, show me that you understand, like an API first mentality. You've worked with OpenAPI or Swagger, you use a tool like Postman. Shout out to my employer, Postman, by the way. Show me that you've got those fundamentals of this is how I do proper RESTful API or GraphQL API or how I do gRPC as an API. Like show me projects that show me you know how to do API design. That's better quality than let me go build one project about authentication. Let me go build one project that does session management. Let me go build another project that does form processing. Let me do another project that does database. I don't want to have to sift through 100 different projects to know that you have all these different fundamentals. I'd rather see fewer projects of quality where you kind of tie all those pieces together to make something more cohesive. So for me, it would be like build me like a full stack kind of app if you're doing like web development kind of stuff. If you're doing APIs, you could show me like one of each kind of like sort of core API, like a RESTful API or a GraphQL API, like something HTTP based. Show me like more of a webhook asynchronous kind of API. Show me a gRPC API. So build me 3 projects instead of building me 50 projects. Fewer is better. So fewer with quality is better than quantity with less quality. That would be my thought on there. So typically what I recommended on the resume earlier, if you missed it on the stream, is 3 projects. Ideally, the first project that you show me on your resume is something that's highly relevant to me and my company. The second project is something that shows me these fundamentals. And the third project is something that you care about. So a passion project or just something fun and geeky that tells me a little bit about you. Those would be the 3 things I'd like to see on a resume. RC Maniac says it's like how one of those #1 CS college things in the country decided to switch from teaching Java to teaching Python. And every college, including MIT and so on, basically switched to teaching Python instead of Java. Yeah, I mean, depending on the program and so on, that does happen for sure. But there are still like low-level system programming jobs that need the compiled languages where Python's not necessarily going to be the best fit. I see a lot of universities now teaching Python as an introduction to programming because it's a little bit more straightforward to learn as far as object-oriented principles and so on than teaching a very verbose language like Java. So that's part of the reason that some of them switched. But yeah, I think that ultimately a lot of CS programs are still going to be teaching some kind of compiled language, whether it's Java or C++. I think they'd be doing a disservice if they expect their graduates to go out and get these low-level jobs where they're building the tools that like a boot camp grad is going to go figure out how to build an application using all of those tools. Because I often get a lot of boot camp grads asking like, how do I compete with a CS degree? It's like you're not being trained to compete with a CS degree. You shouldn't feel like you need to compete with a CS degree. Coming out with a CS degree prepares you for a very different kind of job. You're learning how to build the Lego bricks. As a boot camp grad or a coding program grad, you're learning how to make the TIE fighter out of all those Lego bricks that other people have made the individual bricks, but you know how to make the brick with that CS degree. That's how I see those things. So I don't necessarily see it as a competing thing. You're just prepared for different kinds of jobs. So E equals MC squared. Appreciate the bits. So all the bits, all the donations, all the subs, all that stuff is all going into this pot of money, and then I'm matching all that money. You can do !money if you want to see a web page on kind of my transparency around that. So we're raising money till the end of the year. September, October. Well, September I'm going to be preparing for like kind of the October giveaway where we do some kind of 3D printed thing. I've done these 3D printed dragons in the past where you get like these 3D printed dragon models. This one actually stands up if you hold him just the right way. There we go. So we've given away like dozens and dozens of these things around the world, just as a fundraiser. Not that specific model, but like something like that. So I'm honing in on like what I'm going to 3D print to do the giveaway in October, just to kind of raise this money. I would really want to get to that $1,500 by the end of the year, and then I'm matching whatever money goes in that pool. It's easier to do multiple languages than just one. Yeah, I work at Postman. Why is the UI so wonky in Postman? We're going through and we're rebuilding some of it, so stay tuned. The inputs are smaller than the actual column containing the input. I mean, feel free to drop some feedback. So you can go to github.com/postmanlabs, and you can submit issues and so on, and give that kind of feedback. Zoom level will also have some impact on that too. So are you really zoomed in on the interface? Is it web version or desktop version? Stuff like that. I don't work on the programming team. I do developer advocacy for them, but I'm happy to give that feedback if you can narrow that down a little bit. So yeah, thanks for all the follows. Appreciate all that. Let's see what else. My alma mater switched to the model of Python for introduction and Java C++ for data structures and algorithms. Yeah, that's fair. Apply gravy. Yep, just looking at all the stuff that's going by. I had a really cool intro to programming professor who taught us Python. That was back in 2010. That was a long time ago. Python was, I mean, it's been around a minute. I mean, Python was probably like 10, 15 years old at that point. But yeah, Python's been around a little bit now. I think 30 years as a language. So it still has some growth. It's still got some good opportunity. Be interesting to see, you know, how they improve the speed and things like that. The latest versions have gotten a lot faster for sure. But I mean, I do most of my work, honestly, is in Python and JavaScript. I mean, everything that I do at Postman is in JavaScript, and a lot of the stuff that I do here on the site, like my chatbot and all the automation that I do around the home, is typically in Python, running off Raspberry Pis and stuff like that. Odele, not directly related to interviewing, so feel free to ignore. Okay. Just kidding. Thoughts on the idea of developer productivity teams, which seem like it might be a growing area of focus? I mean, developer productivity is a big thing. Someone was asking earlier, trying to think of how they worded the question. You know, how do I deal with technical debt, or how do we get the team to care about technical debt? You know, because it's kind of slowing us down, but nobody wants to go spend the time to fix it. My recommendation to them was like, talk to your manager about how to fix it, because when it starts to slow down the team, it's impacting things at a bigger level, and it turns into what we call technical debt, where it's things that people just don't want to fix. So we're going to build a way around it so we don't have to deal with it later on. And so you end up building all this other code to ignore the fact that you could just like rewrite this one little part and make it more efficient for everybody. So that really comes down to productivity as a tool. But your team and your management need to be on board with like, hey, we need to spend like 5% of our time as a team or 10% of our time as a team to really focus on changing this thing so that we can like eradicate it and get through it and make other things more efficient. What I've seen some people do is actually like, imagine the microphone here is like the bad piece of code, is actually writing an API wrapper around it to just do pass-throughs. So it's acting just as a proxy. But now you can start to rewrite what's on the inside, where the outer API layer that your code is actually accessing is going through that API. And as you rewrite what's on the inside, this API proxy on the outside knows, oh, someone's coming in on this endpoint. We've actually rewritten that to this faster bit of software. And eventually this part in the middle is going to get smaller and smaller and smaller to where you're replacing it with something else. And then if you also build out those endpoints to be the same way that your proxy API wrapper around it is acting, then eventually you can get rid of that API layer. And now you've got like a new sort of inner working thing where you've now rebuilt what was technical debt. That's one way that I've done it at a previous job, and I've heard other people describe doing it at a job, where just build an API wrapper around it as you rebuild what's inside, and then remove that API wrapper once it's done. As long as you're focusing on the right thing and like rebuilding the right thing. But it is something that you need to talk to your team about, like, hey, we need to allocate time. We don't want to like completely stop everything that we're doing so we can do this thing, but it is something that we need to like gradually start building up that API layer around this thing so that we can start chipping away at what's inside, and then we can take that API wrapper away again. our CMAX says productivity teams goals are usually like, how long does it take to accomplish this thing? Is it getting longer? How do we reduce that time? Yeah. So they're going to be doing a lot of like profiling tools or profiler tools to try to figure out like, where is the bottleneck in the system? How do we make that better? It's an interesting type of role to like step into a role and go, all right, let's see what's making everybody like unproductive today, and let's figure out like, what do we need to go fix. It doesn't necessarily give them the power to fix it, but maybe just to identify and say, yeah, we concur, this part of the system here is like really, really slow. Here's our recommendation for like how to start repairing it. So it's not necessarily that they're going in and fixing it. They might just be like poking at the machine and going, we've identified where the bottleneck is, it's over here. And then how do we make that better? They might have architects on the team or system design folks on the team to figure out like, how do we make that better? It varies from company to company though. But it's interesting to be on those kinds of teams because you've got to be really good at debugging low-level code to try to pinpoint where those bottlenecks are coming into play, and then how to fix them. So you've got to have like really top-notch people on that team. You're not going to take somebody fresh out of a boot camp and go, okay, you're on the productivity team, go find all the bugs in our system and tell us how to make them better. They're not going to have that level of experience. So you're going to have very, very experienced programmers on those teams that can really tear things apart and go, this is where the problem is. It's in this line of code, or, you know, these functions in this module are all really slow. How do we start to improve those? Oh, we got some stuff going on around obligatory question, Vim or Emacs? Yes. I'm a Vim guy myself, but like I said, I like to stay away from politics, so we're not going to have that discussion. Oh, just kidding. It's funny. I see so many like entry-level positions where they list out like, oh, I use VS Code. It's like, I don't care. Don't put that on a resume. Don't tell me what tools you use. Like if it's something like Git or GitHub, like, yeah, put that on as a tool, but like, I don't care how you write your code. I don't care if you use Notepad. I don't care if you use VS Code. I don't care if you use Eclipse. Like, I honestly don't care how you write your code. I just want to know you can get the job done. So it really doesn't matter to me what editor you use. If you want to use Emacs and get into like all the keyboard shortcuts, that's fine. You want to use Vim and the plugin system, that's great too. As long as you can do the job and you feel productive in your working environment, go do the thing. But if you are like, Emacs is really great, but it's like horrendously slow and it's like a 50-step process to do any little thing, I might make recommendations and say like, hey, we need you to speed this up. Could you not use Emacs and use something that's faster? You know, but that's a conversation I would have with you as a manager around like growth opportunities, around like, hey, I noticed like I watched you code and you're kind of struggling with that editor. What if you try this instead? Tabs versus spaces, that's a whole other thing. GitHub Copilot is amazing. I really like playing with GitHub Copilot. It's eerie and scary, like how well it does the job. I was actually working on this overlay the other day on how can I make like a little privacy screen if like somebody comes by and I need to talk to them in a hurry, like how can I actually build this thing out and then like animate, you know, every second or two. And I was just going like, well, I found the template to make the hexagons, but I'm like, how do I change the opacity of a div, or like change the opacity of the div to 80% or something like that? And it basically wrote the next several lines of code of like, go find the HTML ID and like, you know, here's the code to actually change the style of it. And I'm like, that's amazing. The real question is like, who actually owns that code? Like, where did it get that code from? And is their software license compatible with the software license I'm trying to build things in? Do I now have to go release my code as open source because of how it figured that out to actually go build my code? So in a real production system, like when I'm working on code for Postman, I turn GitHub Copilot off because I don't want to deal with legal ramifications, and I don't want my employer to have to deal with those legal ramifications of like who actually owns the code that Copilot helps you write. What I've told students in the past is if you want to use something like GitHub Copilot, write that in a separate file and say, how do I do blah, 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 and let Copilot write you some code. And then you figure out, okay, well, based on what's there, I'm going to go actually write that code and like do that code over here. Because then, you know, you can say, no, I hand wrote this code. I used Google Copilot to kind of point me in the right direction, but I wrote the code myself. Just to get rid of those legal issues out of it. Cool. Well, I've been going for about 3 hours here. If you got other questions, I'm happy to answer other questions. I'm going to mark that other question in Discord as being done. So yeah, we got through about half a dozen questions, handful of other clips and markers and stuff like that. So I think I'm good there. Let's see, who can we go raid? Are there any recommendations for raids? I am open to ideas. Otherwise, there's a game developer. There is somebody learning Python. Somebody building a framework. Nope, they're playing some kind of game. If anybody's got ideas on who we can go raid, let's keep the raid train going here. The company I work for depends on personality and trait tests quite a bit in the hiring process. Do you think tests like that are actually useful in the hiring process? Personality traits are good for determining some aspects of culture fit, as far as like, you know, we have a lot of people on the team that really like helping other people out on the team. And so we like to kind of find other people who are also equally adept and enjoy teaching other people on the team. That shouldn't necessarily disqualify you from working on the team, but a lot of those kinds of things are really like, how well are you going to fit in with everybody else on the team? It feels very clinical, though, in that regard around, you know, you're asking me all these personality questions in order to make a determination on whether I fit in on your team, but you're not really taking as much of a human impact on that, or like a human sort of view or visualization on what are my actual like soft skills. So I think it's an easy way out for companies that haven't figured out how to do a good culture fit kind of interview. Like one story that I tell a lot on the stream is how I interviewed at Yahoo back in like 2005 or 2006, somewhere in there, where I was crushing everything on a technical level, but then they started asking me questions about football, and I don't give a rip about football. Sorry if you like football. I'm from Canada. Ask me anything about hockey. I don't care about football. Football's not like, we had football in high school, but we had more lacrosse and rugby and hockey than we had football. So I didn't grow up learning football stats. I never really watched the Super Bowl until I moved to the United States. So they're asking me like, who won the last Super Bowl? Like name a couple of quarterbacks who won the last Heisman Trophy. I'm like, I don't even know what a Heisman Trophy is. And they're like, you know, you're interviewing with a fantasy football team at Yahoo, right? And I'm like, nope, the recruiter told me to study, design patterns and PHP, not to study football stats. And I said, if I had known that, I would have studied some football stats, you know, coming up here, like just to try to figure out the interview. And they're like, yeah, like you're not going to be a good fit on the team because you're not going to bring that passion every day of like, I understand football. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm from Canada. We have the CFL. It's a 110-yard field, not 100. It's skinnier than yours is here in America. We have a skinnier field. We only get 3 downs instead of 4. We don't have Super Bowl. We have the Grey Cup. We don't have anything like a Heisman Trophy, but we have all the same positions on the football team, same number of players. They're like, we don't care. Like, we don't do the CFL fantasy football. This is the NFL. I'm like, all right, then clearly I'm not a good fit. So a lot of companies, though, don't understand how to find culture fit. So you could be the smartest person in the room and not fit in on the team. They're not going to hire you. But I answered a question earlier tonight of, you know, could that balance tip the other way? If you're super likable and super teachable and everybody really likes you, could you get a job if you don't have the technical skill? And to some degree, like, we're willing to teach you and train you on the technical skill, but we hope you're going to have most of the skill that we're interviewing you for. Like, you know, otherwise we wouldn't be interviewing you in the first place. But to try to fake your way through the interview on just being likable, it's probably not going to be enough. Because again, our industry is one of the few where you have to demonstrate that you can do the job in order to get the job. Because we don't have something like a licensing sort of authority on Ian has performed this many hours writing this kind of code, therefore he is a certified, you know, blah, blah, blah kind of developer. We don't really have that. We have certifications and so on, but then it's up to your organization whether you even trust that certification. And just because I passed, does it really mean that I know it? You know, we don't have like the apprenticeship journeyman sort of ticketing kind of thing that the trade skills have. Like we don't have anything like that. Once you build up enough experience in the industry, then they don't really care anymore about like that level of stuff. Though you're still gonna have to demonstrate some of what you do, but they'll start to trust your experience more than like just the project work that you have. But to get that first job in tech is really, really hard because you have to demonstrate so much of what you do. All right, well, let's go raid out. Someone else that I wanted to raid is not doing software anymore. They're also doing games. So we got somebody learning Python, and we got somebody doing game development in Godot. What do you think? Game development or web application? Let me know in chat what you think, and we'll go set up a raid. And we will carry on the raid. So Python or game development? Web app? Web app? All right. The majority of 2 people have spoken. Oh, 1 person saying game dev. Oh, a couple more people saying web app. All right, so we're going to go for the web app. Thanks again for the follows. Appreciate the raids. Thanks again for the bits coming in. I really, really appreciate that. You're welcome to come back anytime. Drop questions in chat anytime. I know that my stream does overlap a little bit with CM Griffing and Strager and lots of other folks that are doing tech-related talks, but I really appreciate all the questions. They were fantastic questions. Thanks for coming by. You're welcome back at any time. Especially if you've got ideas and perspectives as well. So if you've been in the tech industry a while and you've done interviewing, or you want to help folks with interviews and your perspectives, I'm absolutely happy to have people with differing opinions as well, because we're not always going to agree on things. And so I like to have guests on the stream. This Sunday, we've got somebody from Azure at Microsoft. They're going to be on the stream, and I'm going to be interviewing them about their background and what stands out to a Microsoft interviewer. So come back on Sunday. Last Sunday, we had somebody from Stripe. We got lots of folks lined up. We're going to have Finite Singularity on the stream, I think, on September 15th. So if anybody has been on Mark's channel, I'm hoping to really hoping to get Mark on the stream. But we got a lot of folks lined up. So definitely keep coming back, especially on Sundays. Sundays we have guests where, you know, again, I really like the idea of hearing other perspectives and so on. So feel free to come back on Sunday. I stream at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern time on Sundays. But Thursday night, I'm here at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern every Thursday. Sunday, I offset a little bit because I have a lot of people from Europe and Asia that want to be part of the stream. And so I stream earlier on Sundays. But yeah, thanks for dropping by. Thanks again for the questions. Keep those coming in. Go hang out on Discord. Go follow me on the socials if you want. And again, if you want to ask questions over there, you're more than welcome to. I may bring them back over the stream to answer over here for folks. But otherwise, thanks again for hanging out. We're going to go right over to Chrissy Codes, fantastic streamer. She's learning Python. She does JavaScript. She does data analysis for someone who was asking earlier about data analysis. Really fantastic, very likable person. So we're going to go hang out on Chrissy's stream. Be respectful over there. She doesn't like dealing with people who are there to make trouble or anything like that. But Chrissy's a very genuine person, and she's learning, and she's very open to feedback and very open to interacting with chat. Very fantastic person. So we're gonna go right over there. We'll catch you all on Sunday. Thanks again for hanging out today, and we'll catch you next time.